Although these mysteries did become cold case files, FBI agents are skilled when it comes to criminal investigations, conducting raids and closing cold cases once and for all, even if the true story behind a crime mystery isn't solved until decades later. In July of 1991, law enforcement officers in Michigan responded to a traffic emergency that would turn into an unbelievable true crime story with an unexpected ending. 4 gangsters, Eugene DeRoy, Robert Siegel, Francis Mazza, and Carmen Janis, had called in a phony emergency to distract from their true crime. While law enforcement agents rushed to investigate a major roadway collision that didn't exist, the 4 notorious gangsters rushed to a local bank to commit one of the biggest bank robberies in Michigan history. Their plan had given these criminals an 8-minute window to complete a bank heist and get out fast. To disguise their true identities, the crime experts wore masks of ex-presidents, just like the movie Point Break, a recent film at the time. The on-duty bank manager and teller fully complied without incident, and since the experienced criminal masterminds had perfectly timed the heist over Labor Day weekend, the vaults hadn't been emptied and still contained over $359,000 for the taking. By the time FBI agents had begun their investigation into the robbery, the culprits were already well on their way back to their Chicago hideout. There was very little evidence for FBI investigators to work with at the scene of the crime. Despite years of investigation, the unsolved mystery eventually went into the FBI cold case files and seemed unlikely to ever be figured out. Meanwhile, to hide from FBI agents, Carmen cut off contact with everyone he knew. Even his close children assumed their father had passed on. But the true story behind this crime didn't come out until 2008. Cold case investigators would have a huge break solving the unsolved mystery 17 years later. In one of the most unexpected endings in true crime history, the bank heist was finally solved when Carmen Janis went to renew his driver's license and got his name flagged in a criminal database. The notorious gangster's FBI files were reopened by cold case detectives for further examination. Using the most recent information from his driver's license application, the FBI raided his address and placed him under arrest. The FBI cold case was solved when Carmen Janis was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $90,000 for the bank robbery. What happened to the other criminals will have to remain an untold story for another time. The oldest cold case files ever solved by the FBI date back thousands of years in a really weird history story that's strange but true. In 1915, archaeologists had discovered a crime scene with the 4,000-year-old discovery from Egypt. Much to their amazement, the ancient Egyptian tomb showed crime scene evidence of being raided centuries prior. Artifacts were missing, objects were strewn around, and the casket had been opened. This tomb was built for an Egyptian governor who was buried alongside his wife, but all that was left of the famous couple was a single mummified head. Archaeologists needed to know who it belonged to so they could pay their respects and properly document the historic event. Forensic science could provide no real answers because the face was too eroded to determine if the features were masculine or feminine. For nearly a century, the strange case remained unsolved in one of the world's greatest historic mysteries. In 2009, FBI agents were contacted by a science team who needed their help in an especially fascinating investigation. The FBI was quickly brought up to date on the situation and got to work thinking of a creative solution to see this case solved. Being thousands of years old, most of the ancient body was far too old to obtain an intact sample of DNA from. However, as always, forensic science has a way of discovering the true story. For the past 4 years, expert scientists had tried unsuccessfully drilling into the mummy's teeth to extract tooth powder for DNA evidence. Although their scientific principles were correct, their equipment was inferior. They reasoned that FBI special agents had the forensic tools needed to see the mystery solved. During this special investigation, an FBI agent extracted tooth powder from a molar with a special needle and solved the mystery using a crime scene technique unknown to most. The tooth powder extract was put into a top-secret liquid solution that only FBI law enforcement have access to. This solution amplifies the smallest traces of samples of DNA evidence to far more detectable levels. In this case, an FBI forensic investigator found that this was a male DNA, meaning the remains had to belong to the governor himself. Although the archaeologists were helped by FBI agents, the Bureau was also helping itself by solving the mystery. This amazing experiment has yielded new forensic techniques that have since helped agents discover the true story behind complex crime scenes, particularly those that involve bodies found in extreme weather conditions, and especially with older cases as well. After all, to any agent who can genetically identify a mummy, cold case files that are decades old seem quite easy in comparison. In December of 1988, the Dade County Sheriff's Office in Georgia learned the body of a young woman had been found on I-59 near the small-town community of Rising Fawn. Forensic investigators found the woman to be between 18 and 35 years old. Investigators immediately cross-referenced her with missing person cases across Georgia. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, as well as the FBI, took over the crime case. For years, investigators were unable to identify the woman, referring to her as the Rising Fawn Jane Doe. Decades later, cold case detectives with the FBI turned to a private forensic science company called Othra to help solve the mystery using an advanced genealogical analysis on the unidentified woman. During a preliminary examination, FBI special agents discovered unknown male DNA that was also sent for sequencing by Othra. By June of 2022, the genealogical evidence was matched to 19-year-old Stacy Lynn Chaworski, a missing woman who'd mysteriously disappeared in September of 1988. According to Stacy's mother, she'd planned on hitchhiking from North Carolina to Michigan and went missing. The unsolved case was solved when the FBI investigation concluded that Henry Frederick Wise's DNA was found at the crime scene on Stacy as well. Henry, a stuntman, had met an unexpected ending away on the job in 1999 and escaped further punishment for his crimes. 27-year-old Daniel Danny Michael Weeks had started a romantic relationship with Patricia Esther in late 1981. Patricia was married to Army Sergeant Hubert Esther, but it appears that the relationship was failing. Patricia asked Danny, who was in a biker gang, to take out her husband, and he agreed to the crime. When Sergeant Hubert was found deceased in his home in Los Angeles, Danny was sentenced to life in prison, and Patricia was also charged as an accessory. Danny quickly decided that prison life wasn't for him. In 1986, he and fellow inmates James Colvin escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary and went on the run, putting them on the FBI's most wanted list. After escaping from prison, the convicts forced two women to drive them into Texas. FBI agents found James Colvin, but Danny evaded their investigations all around the country, even seeing himself on the FBI's most wanted list and almost every TV station in the land. For 2 years, Danny managed to evade the FBI and lived his life as though he was a normal person and not a criminal. Then, in 1988, the FBI received a tip and conducted a raid, which led them to solve the cold case once and for all. This tip led to the arrest of Danny, and for his escape, kidnaps, and robberies, he was given another 2 life sentences. In the 1980s, no bank in southern Florida was safe from one notorious robber. Banks would be hit indiscriminately with hostages taken and vaults raided. Local police departments struggled to respond to each incident, and each robbery fell almost at random. For years, the Florida authorities tried to capture the man responsible. The mysterious bank robber was discovered to be Robert Litchfield, and he was finally behind bars for his misdeeds. In 1986, Robert hatched a prison escape plan that, when successful, would lead to him being on the run for a year. Ever the criminal mastermind, his genius plan was to dye his prison-issued clothes blue to match the blue prison guards and investigators. Once he'd managed to dye his uniform, Robert spoke to a prison dentist and began the next phase of his escape. He told the dentist that he was not from a life of crime. The true story, according to him, was that he was an investigator from Miami who'd been tasked with conducting special investigations within the prison. Over time, he slowly gained the dentist's trust and convinced the dentist to hitch a ride with him out of prison. Incredibly, Robert's prison escape worked, and he was soon out of the federal facility in Alabama that once held him. After escaping prison, Robert reunited with his beloved wife, Donna, and the two lived under assumed names. Robert continued robbing banks and committing fraud to fuel his lifestyle. The FBI quickly placed him on their 10 most wanted fugitive list, and an arrest warrant was issued. Robert and Donna traveled across the US before eventually settling in Lake Tahoe. FBI special agents were dispatched to track Robert's movements, and eventually, in 1987, they received a vital tip. They conducted a raid on a home in Zephyr Cove, Nevada, and found Robert and Donna living inside. Not only did they live a new life under assumed names, but Robert had continued committing robberies, and a car was found at the property that was linked to a bank robbery in Boise, Idaho. He'd even gone so far as to get plastic surgery to change his appearance and make him look like the famous actor, Robert De Niro. The arrest of Robert finally put this FBI cold case to an end, and all of the special agents involved were relieved to finally have this prolific bank robber behind bars once and for all. Robert spent the remainder of his life in federal prison before passing away in 2011. 20-year-old Angela Marie Hammond of Kansas City, Missouri, was a popular and bright young woman. Those who knew Angela described her as kind and caring, and by 1991, the 20-year-old had gotten engaged to her high school sweetheart, Robert Schaefer, and the two had just found out that they were expecting their first child. Angela and Rob were excited to become parents, and they began making preparations. When not studying at Central State University, Angela could be found working at a local bank. Everything for the newly engaged couple was perfect. That was until April of 1991, when their lives would turn into a real-life horror story. On April 4th, 1991, Angela and Rob attended a family barbecue and left at around 10 p.m. as Rob had to babysit his younger brother. The couple decided to meet up later that evening, and as Angela drove away, Rob had no idea that it would be the last time he would ever see his fiancée. For the rest of the evening, Angela drove around town with her friend, and the two chatted about Angela's plans for becoming a mother. Eventually, the friend called it a night, and Angela made her way to a nearby payphone to call Rob. At around 11:15 p.m., Rob received a call at his parents' home from Angela, telling him that she was going to go straight home as she was tired. The young couple chatted for a few minutes when all of a sudden, their conversation was broken up by Angela's screams before the line went silent. Just moments before this, Angela had told Rob that a bizarre man had been circling the parking lot close to where the payphone was. After the line went silent, Rob rushed out of his parents' home and jumped into his car. He immediately drove as fast as he could to Angela's location, but was too late. As he rounded the corner, he saw a 1960s or 70s two-tone green Ford pickup with a water decal on the side speed by him. There were faint shouts and cries emanating from the truck, and Rob knew Angela was inside. Unfortunately, Rob's car broke down mid-chase, and the strange man managed to escape. Multiple witnesses came forward claiming to have seen the van in the area the night that Angela disappeared, but nobody has been able to name the driver, with the man being described as a filthy white man with glasses, a beard, and a mustache. Hundreds upon thousands of man-hours have been spent investigating Angela's case, but none of the leads ever panned out. To this day, the Clinton Police Department still receives new leads and tips, and in 2021, they received new information that may just solve the case. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Damon Parsons of the Clinton Police Department at 660-885-5561, quoting case number 910488. 29-year-old Claudia Kershaw had recently gotten her dream job as a travel writer, which saw her traveling to resorts and attractions around the world and reporting on them. By the year 2000, Claudia was stable and happy in her career, so when she received a call to take a last-minute trip to Havana, Cuba for work, she accepted. Little did Claudia or her family know that this last-minute work trip would lead them down the rabbit hole of one of the most bizarre missing person cases ever. On May 24, 2000, Claudia and her coworker, Tanya Grosinger, arrived in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Their excitement quickly fizzled out when they were informed that their work assignment to Cuba had been canceled. To make the situation even worse, all of the flights from Jamaica back to the US were full, meaning the girls were stuck on the island for a few days. Instead of letting this get them down, Claudia and Tanya decided to make the most of their impromptu stay, and thankfully, their employers had found somewhere for them to stay at the Sandals Resort. The two spent the following few days together, and Claudia even caught the attention of Anthony Grant, a bartender at the resort. Claudia and Anthony spent time together when he was off the clock, and on May 27, 2000, Tanya was able to get a flight home. Claudia's flight wasn't for a few more days, and she assured Tanya that she would be fine alone. That was the last time that Tanya ever saw or heard from Claudia again. On June 2, 2000, Claudia failed to show up to work back in New York, and that's when her family and friends knew something was very wrong. Her parents immediately contacted the Jamaican police and the resort where Claudia had been staying. The maids searched the room that Claudia had been staying in and found that her bed had not been slept in for several days, and that all of her belongings, aside from a swimming costume, were in the room. Her passport and wallet were still in the room, meaning she'd not boarded her flight back to New York. The investigation into Claudia's disappearance was bungled from the start. The room she'd been staying in was quickly cleaned out and rented to other guests, effectively destroying any evidence that may have been left behind. Her personal items began to disappear or were misplaced by the local authorities, and her parents were incredibly vocal about the mismanagement of their daughter's case. In the days after May 27th, the last day Claudia was seen, Anthony Grant had phoned in sick to work, and when a forensic examination was undertaken at his home, the police found evidence to suggest that Claudia had been there. Sniffer dogs also tracked Claudia's scent to Anthony's house and alerted to her scent being present on items in his home, such as boots and gloves. Without further conclusive evidence, Anthony Grant could not be charged, and Claudia's case remains cold to this day. Over the years, vital pieces of information and evidence have disappeared, and some people believe that the Jamaican police are covering up the truth about what happened to Claudia. Patricia Mayan was known to be a happy-go-lucky woman with a free spirit and a big heart. But by April of 1989, that had all changed. Patricia's friends and family noticed that the once happy and outgoing Patty had become erratic and withdrawn. Her behavior had massively shifted, and she'd scheduled an appointment to see a psychiatrist on April 21, 1989. The day before Patty was due to meet with the psychiatrist, she would be involved in a car crash that would ultimately lead to her bizarre disappearance. At the time of her disappearance, Patty was living in Bozeman, Montana, working as a ranch hand and also picking up odd jobs to make ends meet. While working as a ranch hand isn't what Patty had always dreamed of doing, she made her situation work and had recently asked her parents if she could move back home to Pittsburgh to be with them. On April 20th, 1989, Patty left her home in Bozeman, Montana, hopping in her Chevy Nova and hitting the road with the destination unknown. At 8:15 p.m. on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana, over 300 miles from Bozeman, Patty lost control of her car as she'd been driving down the wrong side of the road. Her car made contact with an off-duty police officer and narrowly missed another. When the three women got out to assess the damage and to ensure that everyone was all right, two of them noticed something bizarre. The off-duty officer and the other driver would later report that Patty appeared to be in a daze. She stood and stared at the two women she'd narrowly missed for a few seconds before turning around and walking into a field. That was the last time that Patty was ever seen or heard from again. And in the years since her disappearance, there have been over 100 supposed sightings of her. The two women immediately reported the incident to the local police, who were quickly able to discover that the crashed car belonged to Patty. A search was put together, and officers began combing the surrounding woods and forests, looking for any sign of Patty. Despite multiple search efforts, no sign of her has ever been found, and she remains missing to this day. There are numerous reports of Patty being seen at truck stops in Montana and Seattle, but investigators have never been able to confirm the validity of these sightings. Anyone with information is asked to contact Dave Harris, of the Macomb County Sheriff's Office at 406-485-3405, quoting case number 894201. Oliver Wendell Munson was a well-liked teacher at Ellicott City Middle School in Maryland. He was known to take his students bowling twice a week, and his approach to teaching kept his students focused and engrossed. Those who knew Oliver described him as kind and gentle, with an easygoing nature. He had no enemies and was well-liked by everyone who knew him. So why did he mysteriously disappear? Just days after Oliver disappeared, he was due to testify against Dennis Watson, and investigators believe that the two events may be connected. In 1983, Oliver had unknowingly bought a stolen car from Dennis Watson, and when he found out, he knew that he had to do something about it. After speaking to authorities, Oliver had agreed to testify against Dennis in court, but that would never happen. On February 13, 1984, Oliver left his home in Catonsville, Maryland, and headed for work, like he did every morning. Only this time, Oliver would never make it to work. When he failed to show up, the school's administration knew something was wrong, and they immediately contacted his family. When Oliver still hadn't made contact with anyone by Valentine's Day of 1984, his family reported him missing to the Baltimore County Police Department, and the search for Oliver began. Just days after Oliver disappeared, his 1980 Ford Pinto was found abandoned a short distance from his home with a flat tire. There was no indication of a struggle or what had happened to him. Weeks later, 2 receipts with Oliver's name on them from a video store were found in a stolen car in Lincoln Park, West Baltimore. According to reports, forensic evidence was found on and around these receipts, but the DNA evidence is now too degraded to perform an analysis on. Dennis Watson, the man Oliver was due to testify against, denied being involved in Oliver's disappearance, and his case has sat cold since 1980. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Dominique Bridges of the Baltimore County Police Department at 410-887-2214, quoting case number 01E100946. Diana Braungart was in her final year of high school in Festus, Missouri, and couldn't wait to see what the future held for her. When not working hard towards her final exams, Diana worked part-time at the Venture Store in Twin City Mall and was well liked by her coworkers and customers. On March 11, 1987, as soon as the clock struck 10, Diana grabbed her clocking out card, punched it through the machine, and headed towards her bright yellow 1982 Ford Escort. The drive from the mall to her home should have taken her a few minutes, but when 10:30 p.m. came around and there was no sign of Diana, her parents knew something was very wrong. Diana's parents immediately began calling her workplace and her friends, hoping that they held answers to the whereabouts of their daughter. As more and more names were ticked off the list, the Braungarts realized that nobody had seen Diana, and they called the Crystal City Police Department to officially report her missing. Within hours, the police arrived at the Braungart home and began interviewing her parents. Diana and her brother had been adopted at birth, and at first, the police thought that Diana had run away to try and find her birth mother. Hours later, Diana's bright yellow 1982 Ford Escort was found abandoned in the mall's car park. Nothing of note was missing from the car, and there was no sign of a struggle. Days later, a witness came forward and told the Crystal City Police Department that they had seen Diana talking to a man in the car park on the day she disappeared. The witness described the man as white, aged 35 to 40 with dark hair, and around 5'10". Many years later, a man fitting this description was tracked down, but investigators were unable to obtain any new information about him. Unfortunately, Diana's case quickly went cold, and it's remained that way for many decades now. There are very few leads in Diana's case, and her family hopes that she is still out there somewhere. Investigators believe that Diana met with foul play, but are unable to determine where, how, or when. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Charles Womble of the Crystal City Police Department at 636-937-4601, quoting case number 210F80. Gareth Williams was a Welsh mathematician who achieved perfect grades in math and computer science at the age of 13. At the age of 17, he got his first class degree in math, and a year later, he started his PhD in Manchester. He would later become the junior analyst for GCHQ, the Government Communications Headquarters, where he worked as a codebreaker. But little did Williams know that he would become the center of a persistent homicide mystery. In August of 2010, he failed to show up for work. The next day, he didn't show up either. Then a week went by, and Williams still hadn't been seen. Concerned coworkers noticed that they were unable to reach him and sent police officers over to his flat in London, where the MI6 agent had been living for the past year. This flat was also noted as a safe house near the MI6 headquarters. When the police officer showed up at the apartment, he let himself in using a spare key. He found that the curtains were drawn and the place was neat. All appeared in order until the officer noticed a north face holdall inside the bathtub that had been padlocked. Williams was also nowhere to be seen. Eventually, the police were able to access the locked holdall and discovered the curled up remains of a British agent. The body was determined to have been in the bag for at least a week, and by this time it was severely decomposed. Further investigation discovered 15,000 pounds worth of women's designer clothes and makeup. It was suggested that he'd been working as a spy undercover as a woman. Police also ruled the entire case an accident, but after finding none of Williams' DNA on the zipper, padlock, or the fastened Velcro handles, they were forced to reconsider. A toxicology report came back inconclusive, given the state of decomposition, but it had been said that they found no traces of any substances. Investigators did find DNA belonging to an unidentified person on both the padlock and the zipper, but the tub itself had no fingerprints, footprints, or even a palm print. There were no signs of a struggle in the apartment, aside from bruising on the victim's elbows. Adding to the mysterious homicide is that the central heating was turned all the way up, even though it was midsummer. By this time, it was already too late to figure out if he was in the bag when he passed away or if he was placed there. The cause of the homicide is yet to be found. According to a coroner named Fiona Wilcox, Williams's passing was deemed unnatural and likely to have been the result of a planned crime, even though many alleged that it was nothing more than an accident. Dr. Wilcox also voiced her concerns about why it had taken so long for the agent's disappearance to be reported. This delay ultimately led to the loss of key evidence. In 2021, an independent forensic review began, and the results from that investigation were revealed in 2023. It found no new evidence, and experts are still no closer to figuring out what happened to the individual and how he wound up in the bag. The last fact about this case added further eeriness to the homicide. The key to the padlock was found in the bag underneath the victim's remains. In 1939, Alexander D'Agapeyeff, a mapmaker, created the D'Agapeyeff Cipher. It was this year that the cartographer wrote a book titled Codes and Ciphers, which relates to cryptography and its history. Alexander, though, wasn't really a cryptographer, and it appeared that he'd been asked to tackle the subject itself despite not having a wide range of knowledge on it. On the very last page of his book, Alexander left a cipher to the reader, challenging them to test their skills. The cipher consisted of 79 groups of numbers. Each group contained 5 digits that had gone undeciphered for over 70 years. It's this encryption that finds itself mentioned alongside the enigmatic Voynich manuscript. The structure of this encryption presents similarities to the Polybius square, which the author referenced throughout the book. In one section, he even solved the cipher by making use of the Polybius square decryption method. Later, embarrassingly, Alexander admitted that he'd actually forgotten how he had encrypted the message in the first place. So even if we do manage to decipher the text to some degree, we'll have no way of knowing if it's even right. Some cipher enthusiasts believe that the code was botched, rendering it indecipherable. There are still some, though, who maintain that the cipher will one day be cracked, even with the supposed errors. Despite not being solved all these years, the cryptogram takes on a modest, regular appearance. Each group makes up a table of 10 columns and 8 rows. The first thing to be noted about the cipher is that each adjacent column has been formed alternately from 67890 and 12345 characters. This formation gives us a hint that this code is a grid cipher, hence why it was thought to be encrypted using the Polybius square sequence. This also means that we can take out what is referred to as the peristocrat spaces between each block of numbers and rearrange them into pairs. For example, the first two groups reading 75628 and 28591 will be arranged to read 75, 62, 82, 85, and 91. Once this step has been done with each number, we then find our second hint, the two sets of tripled numbers, which reveals that the entire cipher has been scrambled. Tripled letters are extremely rare in ciphers, and there's only one in Latin, with uvula meaning little egg. After some rearranging and forming the Polybius square sequence, we find that a pattern emerges. Of course, the author of this code may have used null characters as well, making it even more difficult to decrypt. Gordon Rugg, one individual who attempted to decipher the code, ended up collaborating with the British researcher Robert Matthews. Matthews suggested that the cipher may be solvable using a genetic algorithm. One of Rugg's students, Stephen, showed that this method may work. Another student named Gavin focused more on the possible human errors that could have been involved. He was able to find some significant proofreading errors in one of the examples that Alexander had written in the book. This suggests that the creator of the cipher made some mistakes in his encryption. But still, the D'Agapeyeff Cipher persists, remaining one of the most mysterious and unsolvable codes in the world. For quite some time, many believed that pyramids were a unique symbol of Egypt, but these triangular land formations have been found elsewhere in the world. Lying in the dry, dusty plains of Argolis is a land of history and mythology, one that holds the ruins of ancient pyramids. Some believe that these pyramids date back to more than 5,000 years ago. It's been suggested to us that the Great Pyramids of Giza are the most recognizable pieces of Egyptian civilization, and they were built in 2500 BC. But if the dating on the ruins is to be believed, the Greek pyramids outdate the Egyptian structures. The best preserved Greek pyramid ruins are the ones found near the Hellinikon village of Argolis, which has been named the Hellinikon Pyramid. The structure was made from unpolished stone and appeared to be more primitive than the ones we find in Egypt. But these findings pose an enduring mystery for archaeologists and historians. No one knows what they were used for. In the 2nd century AD, Pausanias characterized them as tombs, but this is the best guess that historians could come up with. The truth about the Greek pyramids is just as enigmatic as their origins. The Hellinikon remains are found 9 kilometers from Argos, situated toward the southwestern edge of the Argolid Plain. The construction is relatively small. The building surrounding it is only 23 by 30 feet, and what's left of the external walls rises just 11 feet at a 60-degree angle. German and American archaeologists excavated the pyramid in the early 1900s. During these excavations, the entrance door, a pithos, walls, and a floor of the long corridor were unearthed. It was also suggested that Hellinikon was built during the 4th century BC. When it comes to this dating, great controversy has been sparked. A more recent method of dating ancient structures was used, and it was found that the pyramid was built in 3000 BC. The date later changed to 2720 BC, but is yet to be cross-referenced by other methods. The date that the pyramid was built has since remained a mystery, and historians can't seem to agree on when it was completed. We then get to the mystery of the structure's purpose. No one knows what it was used for, and no clues gave a definite answer. A number of theories have been sparked regarding the Greek pyramids, but none of them have been confirmed. Some suggested that it was a military base or a beacon that marks the site of an ancient battle. Others believe that the construction is a tomb or a monument for the deceased. Archaeologists proposed that Hellinikon was a memorial site, but their ideas as to what it's memorializing differ. Using a more practical outlook, others have put forward that it may be an observation communication tower that was used to control the area. Other theories include a place where smoke signals could be sent, or a ritual center for worshipping warriors and heroes of ancient times. But no such statues relating to the warriors and heroes have been found there. Hellinikon's pyramid remains an intriguing mystery and the subject of debate. Its purpose and origins have remained unknown, and professionals have yet to determine the details of the Greek pyramids.
Adding just an extra hint of mystery is the fact that this great discovery isn't mentioned in the updated textbooks of ancient Greek history and archaeology for Anglo-America. It also appears that the excavations on the Pyramid of Hellinikon have been suspended. Writers who refer to the Greek pyramids and Hellinikon constantly refer to the secrets that these sites may hold. Encased in a room at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, above the fragments of early civilizations, are the images of ancient written tablets, encrypted with the world's oldest undeciphered writing, Proto-Elamite. The tablets date back to 3000 BC, and around 1600 of them were found. It's believed that the script originated in Iran and is housed in the Louvre. A researcher named Hendrik Hemu was in the process of testing a new technology. This new technology would scan clay tablets with cuneiform in 3D. This is when he accidentally stumbled across another 3 fragments from a Proto-Elamite cuneiform script. The script is often associated with Mesopotamia and ancient languages, but remains undeciphered despite various attempts at trying to figure out what they say. Despite making use of the same methodologies used in decrypting linear Elamite, the texts remain a mystery. It was Hendrik who came up with a new way of jotting down the texts in order to be deciphered, making use of 3D rendering, which aided in understanding many clay tablet cuneiforms. But even with this new technology, the Proto-Elamite cuneiform script remains a mystery. And it's not just the strange, undecipherable text that makes it enigmatic, but also the duration that it was used for. This kind of text has existed for just a few hundred years, and researchers can only guess why. Perhaps it was too difficult to use, or there was a loss of knowledge since no educational system was set in place just yet. It's possible that the users of this script were subjected to the changes inflicted upon them by a different group with an alternate culture. It could even be plausible that an epidemic wiped them out, but we just don't know about it. Not knowing who the writers were or why they stopped using this text method makes deciphering the tablets a whole lot more difficult. Researchers don't have much reference material, and only 1,600 specimens exist. Each of these dates back to between 3100 and 2800 BC. These tablets also come from the Susa and surrounding area, lending itself to a different story than the more common cuneiform script from Mesopotamia, of which millions of texts have been uncovered. Since the discovery of these tablets, researchers and experts have been left baffled, wondering what clues these texts hold about the ancient world. They've been presented with various obstacles when it comes to the Proto-Elamite script. The artifacts date back to a time when society suddenly became a whole lot more complex. The communities grew larger, and the cities were established. Food production saw an increase and needed to be organized on a larger scale. It is possible that the tablets hold key information about irrigation, harvest, trading supplies, counting, dividing, and more. Despite consistent research and technological advancements, the Proto-Elamite script has been left undeciphered, remaining the most enigmatic piece of writing to have plagued the minds of historians, archaeologists, and other experts since they were discovered. 1,300 years ago, Egyptians produced a strange book that they'd written in Coptic. It was called the Handbook of Ritual Power, and is made up of about 20 bound parchments. It's the handbook of a ritual practitioner that researchers refer to as a codex. This ancient book begins with a lengthy series of invocations, culminating with drawings and some words of power. These invocations are soon followed by a variety of prescriptions and spells. These spells range from cures for ailments to cures for possession, or from love binding and business success. It's only been in recent years that this ancient spellbook has been deciphered, allowing us to learn the ritual powers that were practiced by an ancient culture. Through this deciphering, we're now able to know how to subjugate a person using a magical formula. Researchers have suggested that this codex dates to around the 7th or 8th century. It was during this time that many Egyptians took on a Christian religion, allowing a few more of the invocations to refer to Jesus. But the book also seems to refer to a group of people known as the Sethians. According to the decrypted texts, this group flourished in Egypt amid the early centuries of Christianity. This group also holds Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, in high regard. but this group were regarded as heretics, and by the 7th century, the Sethians were on the road to extinction. So if the text has already been deciphered, then what exactly is the mystery here? Well, while experts were deciphering the book, they came across a divine figure mentioned in its opening. The name was Baktiyotha. The line reads as follows, saying, quote, "I give thanks to you, and I call upon you, the Baktiyotha, the Great One, who is very trustworthy, the one who is lord over the 40 and 9 kinds of serpents." Many attempts have been made to pin down the name's significance and etymology. These attempts were able to draw connections to not only Coptic, but also Hebrew and the principles of gematria. In an extensive research paper, Khorshid Dosu spoke at length of Baktiyotha while he attempted to figure out his origins. Khorshid discovered that the serpents that the text refers to are this entity's servants, who are both in the abyss and in the air. The servants are also blind and deaf, seeing and hearing, with a sphere falling over them all. It becomes clear that Baktiyotha is an important figure in these texts, and forms part of a massive mythic schema. Khorshid also explored the possibility and understanding of the name being linked to the deacons, a 36-star configuration that circles the sky to the south of the ecliptic. They're often found in coffin lids and are somewhat linked to the zodiac. The deacons were responsible for keeping track of hours, 10-day periods, and years. But the connection between the number 49 that the text refers to and the 36 deacons has not been so easy to resolve. Researchers have found a connection to the number 49 in apocryphal Christian texts. They first noted that the number 49 was the square of the number 7. They also determined that in the Apocryphon of John, 365 powers are created by the 7 planetary rulers. Each produces 7 powers, totaling 49 powers. Perhaps Baktiyotha connects to these 7 powers, who may serve under him. Some of the language that's been used in the Codex seems to refer to a male user, but this wouldn't stop a female from making use of the text and being a ritual practitioner. Adding to the list of mysteries that the deciphered text holds is its origins. Macquarie University had obtained it from an antiquities dealer named Michael Fackelman in 1981. The style in which it was written, though, does point to Upper Egypt. The Handbook of Ritual Power now lies in the Museum of Ancient Cultures at Macquarie University in Sydney, keeping all its mysteries embedded in its pages. Gilgamesh is one of the best-known ancient Mesopotamian heroes. He's said to be the semi-mythic king of Uruk. He was also mentioned in the great Babylonian poem The Epic of Gilgamesh, which predates Homer's Odyssey by 1,500 years. This poem stands as the oldest piece of epic world literature. This character has also been mentioned in various Sumerian poems. Despite all these mentions, though, the existence of the hero has remained a topic of debate. Historical evidence as to Gilgamesh's existence has been found in 12 incomplete tablets written in the Akkadian language. They were discovered in Nineveh in the library of the Assyrian king, who reigned from 668 to 627 BC. Gaps in the tablet have been filled in using other existing fragments found elsewhere. A few other short poems regarding Gilgamesh have been found as well. He's also been mentioned in the Sumerian list of kings as reigning after the flood. That being said, there's no historical evidence for the exploits mentioned in the poems and epic, leaving the hero's true existence a mystery. Gilgamesh is depicted as one who struggled to find the meaning of life and embarked on a quest for eternal life, which came after his friend's passing. The tales of the hero were told orally, way before it had been written down. While no contemporary information is known about Gilgamesh, it's believed that if he did exist, then it would have been somewhere around 2700 BC. Ancient texts suggest that this character was 7 feet tall, the result of a goddess and a mortal father. But this, of course, lends the legend to mythology. But still, the existence of this heroic king seems to remain a subject of debate. Situated in the hub of China's Guizhou province, there lies a geological phenomenon that has attracted tourists and puzzled experts for years. The Chandaya Cliff has been grotesquely named the Egg-Laying Mountain because it seems as though it lays stone eggs every now and again. A southeastern Chinese village that's been described as unusual found itself at the center of much media attention because of the cliff face and its large, round 660-pound egg rocks. Located near the unusual village of Guluzai is the cliff that drops stone eggs once every 30 years. Scientists have yet to provide a proper explanation for why this occurs, but according to the locals, the ejected eggs tumble to the ground, where they lie and wait to be discovered. It's this village that the Shui people have inhabited for the past millennium. They think of their mountain as a weird and natural wonder. Chandaya is a small cliff, only measuring 6 meters wide and 20 meters in length. The stone eggs range anywhere from 20 to 60 centimeters in diameter. They take on a dark blue appearance and are perfectly smooth. Some of the polished and cleaned specimens allow for adequate light reflection. This incident has been going on for hundreds of years, with stories being passed down from generation to generation about the egg-laying mountain. Aside from these egg-producing capabilities, Chandaya is also renowned for its inscriptions and carvings that tell the story of the history of the region. How the stone eggs came to be remains an enduring mystery today, and is the subject of various studies. It was found, though, that the eggs and the host rock are from the Cambrian period age, which occurred around 500 million years ago. This period belongs to the Paleozoic era, famous for the Cambrian explosion, during which the Earth's first animals appeared and diversified. It was determined that the smooth stones are made mostly of silicon dioxide, and that the surrounding cliff is made from calcareous rock. This type of sedimentary rock is the fast eroding type that begins to deteriorate quicker than the metamorphic eggs. For 30 years, natives have watched as the stones lie in their incubated overhangs, while further weathering and erosion take place, eventually pushing out the rounded rocks. We won't know exactly how many eggs the mountain has inside until it is completely deteriorated. Experts can only speculate that this enigmatic mountain was once underwater, which may be a possible cause for the stone eggs. Since the discovery of the Chandaya, more than 100 stone eggs have fallen from the cliff and lay at the base. Around 70 of them have been grabbed by locals who keep them in the village as symbols of luck and good fortune. Almost every family owns at least one of them. They're highly valued and are thought to be a protective entity over the homes and animals. The legend of the egg-laying mountain remains an enduring mystery. With only one of them in existence, it's difficult for experts and scientists to figure out the origins of the random stone eggs that have been encased in rock. The Cambrian rock is believed to be the host to high concentrations of silicon dioxide, and forming a spherical shape would take the least amount of effort for the molecules. But this is currently just conjecture, with no real studies to back it up. Several thousand years ago, there were some Greeks and Romans who walked the streets carrying what looked like twisted, disembodied hands. On occasion, they would mount the corpse-like hands on wooden poles and parade them around. But these hands didn't belong to the deceased. They were mere bronze castings, adorned with snakes, and sometimes a secret compartment on the wrist. The hand would usually show a strange gesture, leaving the pinky and ring finger down towards the palm, with the middle and pointer finger pointing to the sky, and the thumb placed disproportionately in front of them. There existed various types of bronze hands, adorned with other objects and symbolism. One well-preserved one held a pine cone on the tip of the thumb, a bell on its wrist, and the hand of an unknown figure atop the two fingers that were curled into the palm. Another discovery of the artifacts held a pigeon at the top, the upward-pointing fingers, and a snake wrapped around the wrist. Another hand was discovered in 1848 AD in France. This time, though, it bore characteristics consistent with Dupuytren disease, with an object on the fourth and fifth finger that seemed to be weighing them down. More symbolic entities dangled from the wrist of the hand, which were also indicative of Dupuytren disease. But what exactly were these eerie-looking hands, and why were they being carried around by the Romans and Greeks? It turned out that they were the hand of Sabazius, a sacred symbol of a long-lost, mysterious ancient cult that worshipped the god of Sabazius. Sabazius was the deity of fertility and vegetation, which is often worshipped alongside Zeus and Dionysus, who were respected as the same god. But the exact significance of the hand isn't known in this regard. Scholars, experts, historians, and researchers have attempted to figure out what this motif means for the cult. Records of the god were found to date back as early as the 1st century. Many societies during this time would practice syncretistic religions, which were open to change and influenced by other religions that they were exposed to by outsiders. The cult of Sabazius was popularized by the Indo-European people, and it was influenced by the Eastern and Egyptian religions. It was also found that followers of this cult believed in the afterlife, but due to the many variations, it was extremely difficult to identify the characteristics of the religion. Not much is known about the god Sabazius, and only a few historical representations of him have been discovered. These depictions show him sitting on a throne, holding a spear, and libation. Others show him riding a horse and wearing a crown, or being swarmed by snakes and eagles. The bronze hands that bear the Benedictio Latina gesture were found to be associated with the cult, but it's uncertain to what degree. Adding further mystery to this ancient religion is that no temples dedicated to the god have been found, which leaves many questions unanswered, including who exactly the god was, the significance of the hand, and the cult's practices. The bronze hands may be the only remnants indicating that this cult even existed in the first place. The Codex Seraphinianus was a book written by the Italian architect and designer Luigi Serafini. He was born in Rome in 1949 and began his book in 1976, only completing it 2.5 years later. In 1981, the book was published and became a genuine cult object. It was rich with imagination, and an undecipherable, invented language littered its pages. The codex had been modeled on an encyclopedia. It was divided into a few different themes and sections. Each page bore an imaginative illustration and the accompanying squiggly lined text. It was on an unknown day in September of 1976 when Luigi sat in his scriptorium and began scribbling down his illustrations. Illustrations depicting hybrid human bodies, bicycle wheels, and fountain pens adorn the pages. There was no plan in mind for any of the drawings. They simply spilled from the mind's vision, sprawling across the pages. It was also indicated that these drawings were being presented by the illustrator through an alien life form, or perhaps his cat. Combined with these odd images was equally odd text. It was an imaginary language where the writer was free from the rules of the alphabet. This freedom both disavowed and mocked the aim of any language, which is for communication. Luigi's writing was soft, rounded, and full of squiggles. The only problem was that it was indecipherable. The system of writing that the author used appeared to have been modeled on Western writing systems, using the left-to-right writing in rows. It also made use of an alphabet that had both uppercase and lowercase letters. Some of these letters may have doubled as numerals as well. Some of the characters either appeared before or after a word, making it similar to Semitic writing systems. Cryptographers also noted that the letters are thread-like, harboring loops and knots, which resemble the Sinhala script. No one has been able to decipher this cryptic text, and many have tried. The book was intended to spark the world of imagination that exists within everyone's mind, which it succeeded in doing, but it also left behind a world of mystery, leaving many baffled as they try to understand it. Cain Foucher was one such individual who attempted to crack the codex. He spent months drawing up tables and creating matrices as he tried to decipher the text, but this would lead him to an unexpected suggestion. Maybe the book didn't mean anything at all. Perhaps it was just an accumulation of squiggles, lines, knots, and twirls that were created to bewilder. It was the spring of 1882 when a well-spoken man rolled into Essex County, New York. He was aboard a yacht coming from Philadelphia. The man carried with him an air of mystery and charm. He went under the name of Henry DeBosnys. He spoke many languages and was well-traveled, making him an intriguing individual for the small town. After grabbing the attention of a local widow, Elizabeth Wells, the two would engage in a whirlwind romance. This romance ultimately led to their marriage. Elizabeth had her fair share of heartbreak throughout her life, after 2 previous husbands passed away under mysterious circumstances. This time, though, it was her who would meet her end. The couple embarked on a picnic on the 1st of August, after which the woman would be found deceased. Her throat had been marked with a blade, and it was quite obvious that she was the victim of a brutal homicide. Suspicion immediately fell on the mysterious man who rolled into town just months prior. The townsfolk were shocked when they saw Henry being placed in handcuffs. It wasn't just the arrest that caught their attention, but also the man's strange behavior. He denied committing the crime and proclaimed his innocence. As investigators dug up more on his past, they found even more questions. Questions about who Henry DeBosnys really was. It was found that this charming individual had a past filled with deception and darkness. For years, he had assumed alternate names and different identities. He had traveled across America and Europe, but no one was certain of his exact origins. During his trial, the mystery man tried to confuse the court using his intellect and charm. By the end of the trial, Henry found himself convicted of homicide, but even in his passing, he left behind mystery and intrigue. The mystery presented itself in the form of cryptic messages. While in prison, he jotted down numerous poems and yet-to-be-decrypted cryptograms. The undeciphered texts contained various pictograms including Egyptian hieroglyphs, a pictorial sun, a man leading a donkey, a tree, and even a mermaid. He would also occasionally sign different initials. Cryptogram 1A was signed by H.D. DeBosnys, while Cryptogram 1B was signed by LMF. One of the texts also included the symbol of Freemasonry, adding further intrigue to this mysterious man. Henry used double letters as well, making the cipher a bit more complex, along with ornamental snakes. Right at the heart of the issue, in attempting to decipher these texts, are the clustered glyphs that are presented in the poems and messages. Many of them are formed from a consistent set of subshapes, presenting the idea that they're vowels, common letters, or even spaces. Aside from the cryptograms that have gone unsolved, Henry DeBosnys himself remains an enigmatic individual whose true identity has never been determined. Everything he told police and investigators was incomplete. It's also believed that the cryptograms may hold personal information about the man, so decrypting them may give insight into who he really is. According to his own account, Henry was married twice before as well. His first wife was discovered in the New York City River, deceased, and his second wife was found in Philadelphia after having perished due to starvation, both of which arouse further mystery.
The FBI's most wanted list has included some of the world's most well-known criminals, like Osama bin Laden and Ted Bundy. Most of the lesser-known characters that find themselves on the list have been involved in trafficking, fraudulent activity, or homicides. One of the lesser-known categories, though, is the white-collar crime group. The category highlights that business and government officials have defrauded institutions and organizations of large sums of money. Frank Bush Amir was working as a catering manager for an Illinois hotel, but this hotel began to notice the disappearance of funds that were due to them. An investigation found that between January of 2000 and October of 2003, Amir had been placing the missing funds into a personal account, using a variety of fraudulent means to cover his tracks. It wasn't until July of 2007 that a federal arrest warrant was filed against the man. Amir was charged with wire fraud, and it didn't take long for authorities to catch up to him, and he was promptly arrested on the 16th of July. A few months later, he was released on bond, but after failing to report as required by the terms of the bond, a subsequent bench warrant was issued in February of the following year by the United States District Court. According to authorities, Amir is known to portray himself as an incredibly wealthy individual and may have ties to Iran. He's of Iranian nationality and is a naturalized American citizen. Amir uses a few different birth dates, including the 21st of March, 1958, the 21st of March, 1956, and the 1st of August, 1958, which leaves his age undetermined. At the time that he went into hiding, Amir had balding black hair and brown eyes. He stands at 5 foot 9 inches tall and weighs around 200 pounds. He's known as a hotel manager and may seek more business opportunities in this field. If he did in fact flee to Iran, the possibility of extradition would be deemed impossible. Any tips may be directed to any local FBI office or your nearest American embassy or consulate. Alternatively, a tip can be submitted to the FBI through their website. Dr. Gautam Gupta has advertised his weight loss clinics across Chicago TV for almost a decade. Gupta is known as a Rockford weight loss doctor who owns and operates the nutrition clinic. The 5 clinics that he owns can be found in Arlington Heights, Naperville, Rockford, Chicago, and South Beloit. This doctor, though, would attract more attention than he wanted. He's being sought now by the FBI. Gupta is facing charges of defrauding insurance companies as well as the government out of $25 million. A federal criminal complaint has accused the doctor of healthcare fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy. It's been alleged that he and members of his staff submitted claims to the Blue Shield Insurance Company, as well as the Illinois Medicaid program, and these claims were for unnecessary procedures, some of which were never even performed. Medicaid is a United States health program for low-income families. It's funded by the federal and state governments. Amid investigations, agents would go in undercover posing as patients, but Gupta was not at any of the clinics. From June 2001 to January 2010, the nutrition clinic received almost $25 million for their claims. Many of the patients who were aided by the clinics owned by Gupta claimed that they would have ultrasound tests conducted on them prior to speaking with a physician or a physician assistant. This meant that there was no way for the physician to determine if the patient even needed the ultrasound in the first place. The complaint also added that staff members would hand out weight loss medications without consulting any practicing physician. The patients would then be asked to return once a week to be given more. During the visits, women dressed in medical scrubs and would take the patient's blood pressure and weight. They wouldn't even leave the room to consult or obtain permission from a physician to prescribe and dispense medications. Phentermine is one of the medications given and is a dangerous medication that can have a variety of side effects. These include increased blood pressure, psychosis, irregular heartbeat, and chest pains. It was also found that the women who were dressed in scrubs were in fact not even nurses. Gupta has also not employed any fully trained or qualified nurses in his practice. He would also pressure the staff into falsifying notes attached to patient charts. This isn't the first time that this doctor's had run-ins with the law, though. His controlled substance license was placed on probation in 1999 when the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation found that he was failing to apprise many female patients of the procedures needed in completing heart-lung exams. Then in 2009, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission accused the doctor of insider trading. He was then charged with using illegal information to buy $1 million worth of Georgia Pacific stocks prior to the Koch Industries takeover. Later, Gupta would sell the shares for $690,000 in profits. He was ordered to repay them with interest and paid the civil penalty of $690,000. Gupta managed to find himself on the FBI's most wanted list later on. The charges against him include 1 count each of mail fraud, conspiracy, and healthcare fraud. If he's captured and convicted, he could face a 35-year prison sentence. At the time that the arrest warrant was issued for the doctor, he was 57 years old. His last known address was in the 1600 block of North Mulford Road in Rockford. Federal authorities suggest that he's since fled the country and might be in India. Interpol has been alerted for the ongoing manhunt for Gupta. The wanted fugitive is said to be 5 foot 5 inches tall, weighs around 160 pounds, and has graying hair, which he's been known to wear in a ponytail, and he has brown eyes. Any information regarding the whereabouts of Dr. Gupta can be directed to the Chicago FBI at 312-421-6700. 43-year-old Kevin Vermette was working at a gym in British Columbia, Canada. On an unspecified date, Mark Teeves approached Vermette, and he was upset about the music that the gym had been playing. According to police, Vermette used racial slurs during the confrontation, and soon a feud was sparked between the two men, as well as Mark's friends, who regularly attended the gym. After this, the two would have several more run-ins with one another. 1 month after the initial conflict, the two were again engaged in an argument that led to Vermette assaulting Mark. In July of 1997, Vermette found his tires slashed and blamed it on Mark and his 3 friends, Michael, David, and Donnie. He threatened to take their lives at this point, and later that day, Mark and his friends headed to a park on their way to attend a party. At some point, Vermette arrived there with a firearm. Staying true to his threats, he fired at all 4 men. Mark, Michael, and David were fatally wounded, while Donnie was severely injured. Fishermen who'd been fishing nearby heard the sounds and discovered the 4 men. Eyewitness testimony allowed police to charge Vermette with the homicides. The only problem was they couldn't find him. A search for the fugitive uncovered his vehicle, which he'd abandoned at his motel residence. He fled the area on foot along with his black Labrador dog. The mountain wilderness was thoroughly searched, but to no avail. The criminal was gone. Despite being well known in the area, Canada's most wanted criminal was never found. The police investigation has since remained open, but so has the mystery of what happened to the suspect. It would be easy for the criminal to be able to make a new identity for himself, relocate to a different area, or find a hideaway in the wilderness where no one would ever find him. Vermette is wanted for triple homicide in the 2nd degree, and he's considered armed, violent, and dangerous. An updated sketch of what he may look like today, as he nears 70 years old, has been released by the British Columbia Police. In 2015, the $25,000 reward that was being offered for information on Vermette expired. A $2,000 reward is now being offered for information that may lead to the man's arrest and conviction. He's the sole suspect in the case of the 3 slayings, and to this day remains at large. At the time that he went missing, Kevin Louis Vermette had brown hair and blue eyes. He's described as 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighs around 160 pounds. He's known to have the tattoo of a cat inscribed with the word "lucky" on his upper right arm. On his upper left arm, he has a coyote and moon, as well as a sharpened blade running through a red rose. At the time he disappeared, Vermette was 42 years old. He's been described as an experienced outdoorsman and a loner. Any information about the fugitive can be directed to the Crime Stoppers tip line at 1-800-222-8477 or the RCMP department at 250-632-7111. In 2005, one of the cybercrime underground's trusted services was launched. Try2Check was used to check the validity of stolen credit card data. It didn't take long for the company to be processing over 1 million card-checking transactions each month, with a 20-cent charge per transaction. Criminals of the cyber world turned to this kind of service to buy stolen credit card information. They aimed to minimize the number of cards that became inactive by the time they're used for criminal gain. Try2Check became so reliable that it became the official card-checking service for crime industries like Vault Market, Joker Stash, and Eunuch. Try2Check's website, though, was replaced by a notice from the United States Secret Service and the United States Department of Justice. These 2 associations acted as prosecutors in New York's Eastern District, where they unsealed an indictment and search warrant for Denis Kulkov, the man behind the illegal credit card checking service. At the same time, they issued a $10 million reward for any information that would lead to the conviction of Kulkov. The State Department would also start offering $10 million for the name or location of the key leaders of Revel, a Russian ransomware gang. The Secret Service's criminal complaint stated that Try2Check was initially advertised on a Russian cybercrime forum by a person who handled Kreenjo. The handle was found to have the same ICQ Instant Messenger account number, 555724, as another cybercrime forum user named Nordex. In 2017, law enforcement seized a cryptocurrency exchange, BTC-E, and found records of Kulkov using the username Nordexin, an email address, and an address in Samara with the same name. The 43-year-old mastermind behind the credit card checking service made at least $18 million. He used this money to purchase a Land Rover, Ferrari, and various other luxury items. Investigators would also go on to find a few Instagram accounts belonging to Kulkov, where he posts pictures of his Ferrari and his family. They also found that he had an iCloud account linked to another Nordexin username. Ironically, the link between this man and Try to Check could be made through records that were plundered by hackers and published online. Denis Kulkov is being charged with access device fraud, computer intrusion, and money laundering in connection with the criminalistic company. While a warrant of arrest has been issued for this man, trying to detain him is going to be a whole lot more problematic unless he travels outside of Russia. The country's constitution prevents the extradition of criminals and very rarely agrees to cooperate with governments from the outside. Kulkov was born on the 8th of April, 1980 in Russia. He's said to have black hair and brown eyes. He stands at a height of 5 feet and 7 inches tall and weighs around 170 pounds. Kulkov may use various aliases including Krinjo, Nordex, or Nordexin. Any information that may lead to the apprehension of this man may be directed via email at mostwanted@uss.dhs.gov. Alternatively, tips can be submitted to your nearest U.S. embassy or consulate. An award for information leading to the whereabouts of other Try to Check leaders has also been offered. It was the summer of 1983, and 22-year-old Sid Wells was living with his older brother Sam in a Boulder, Colorado condominium. At the time, Sid was attending the University of Colorado, where he would be studying journalism. During his freshman year, Sid had fallen for a girl in his dorm named Shauna, the daughter of actor Robert Redford. The brothers soon began looking for a third roommate to help out with the rent, so they posted an ad detailing what they were looking for. It didn't take long for them to receive a response. The ad was answered by 24-year-old Thane Smika, a graduate of Colorado State University. Smika moved into the condo with the brothers and rented a room, but as time went on, Sid began having trouble collecting the rent from the man. He also told his family that the new roommate seemed a little off and unsocial. Sometime in July, Sam headed off on a camping trip, but when he returned on the 1st of August of that year, he was met with a traumatic sight. Inside the apartment, Sid was lying face down with no signs of life. There was a wound on the back of his head, and it was clear that he'd been fired upon from behind. Smika's rent was due that day. Sid was just about to enter his senior year of college when he was struck down. Shauna had been with him just a few short hours before the event and was incredibly devastated. She quit college and began her grieving journey. Police turned their focus to the crime scene. There, they found the same firearm that was used to take Sid's life. After compiling their evidence, the authorities arrested the man behind the crime on the 6th of October for homicide in the first degree, and the family were elated. They felt as though they could settle down and that law enforcement had done their job. But then they learned that prosecutors declined the charges against Smika, stating that there was insufficient evidence. Boulder County Deputy Chief David Hayes was reluctant to give up fighting for justice for the Wells family. In 1986, the criminal's car, a Dodge Aries, was found abandoned in Beverly Hills and had all fingerprints wiped away. In 1997, the case was reopened and the Federal Bureau of Investigation stepped in. They established new forensic evidence as well as ballistics that tied Smika to the crime. In 2010, the Boulder County District Attorney signed off on an arrest warrant that sought the apprehension of Thane Smika for homicide in the first degree. By this time, though, the criminal was long gone. Authorities believe that he was assuming a new identity and may be working as a bookkeeper or an accountant. More recent information places him near Puerto Vallarta in Mexico. The Boulder Police Department and the FBI are now seeking any tips that may lead to the apprehension and conviction of the fugitive. They've released a time progression of what he may look like now. The Bureau is offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the man's arrest. Thane Allen Smika was born in 1959 in North Dakota. He has brown hair and hazel eyes, and he's said to be 5 feet and 11 inches tall and weighs about 140 pounds. Information regarding the whereabouts of this man can be directed to any local FBI office or the nearest American embassy or consulate. Who knew that famous rap legend Tupac Shakur would have a family member who made the list of the FBI's most wanted? Tupac's aunt, Assata Shakur, who's also known as Joanne Deborah Chemichard, found herself on the most wanted list in 2013 after nearly 35 years on the run. Asada was a known political activist and a member of the BLA, a nationalist Marxist militant organization that not only carried out some pretty demonstrative acts involving explosives, but also initiated robberies and prison breaks. In 1973, Asada and other army members, including Zaid Malik Shakur and Sundiata Akoli, were driving through the New Jersey Turnpike when they got pulled over by two state troopers. The troopers were James Harper and Werner Forster, who noticed a broken taillight and that the driver was slightly over the speed limit. There are many conflicting accounts of what happened next, but whatever it was, it resulted in the drawing of firearms. The battle left both Asada and James Harper wounded, while the rest of them lost their lives. 5 years later, Asada was arrested and convicted of homicide in the first degree, but her confinement would not be long-lasting. Just 2 years later, in 1979, she escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women located in New Jersey. Her escape was aided by 3 other members of the BLA who came to visit her. They all drew firearms and took 2 of the guards hostage before fleeing the prison. It's believed that the now 76-year-old is living in Cuba. In 1984, she was awarded political asylum, where she wrote Asada, an autobiography, in 1987. The book was published in 2014, and a dramatized version appeared on BBC Radio 4 in 2017. Ever since the convict's escape, American officials and the FBI have been trying to extradite her back to New Jersey, but have remained unsuccessful. The Bureau placed a $2 million reward on her head for the capture and return of her. The latest extradition was during a speech given by Donald Trump in 2017, referring to Asada by her birth name. The wanted woman also has her own website where she admits to escaping from a prison that brutalized her. She escaped the maximum security wing. She tagged her website with the following message, saying, quote, "I've advocated and still advocate for revolutionary changes." Asada Shakur was born in New York and uses 1947 and 1952 as her birth dates. She has black graying hair and brown eyes. At the time that she went into hiding, she was 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighed between 135 and 150 pounds. She's known to have scars on her chest, left shoulder, left knee, and abdomen. Asada remains a leading figure in the 70s BLA movement and remains on the FBI's most wanted list 40 years after fleeing to Cuba. Not much is known about the 400 Mawozo gang prior to 2019. The name is said to translate to 400 lame men and is presently the largest active criminal group in Haiti. It's believed that the gang was first created in 2016 and has been expanding ever since. Experts on the topic of gangs and organized crime groups consistently refer to 400 Mawozo as the most worrying organization in the country. There are many components that add to the dangers of the group, including high-powered weapons, political connections, and participation in criminal economies. The gang began using express kidnapping in the country on a terrifying level. Express kidnapping is a form of abduction where criminals threaten tourists into drawing large amounts of money from ATMs. Since 2020, 400 Mawozo has been sending small groups of men on motorcycles to target people on the main roads. They're known to keep the victims for a few days and later release them after a small ransom is paid. In 2021, the gang abducted 17 American and Canadian citizens. The first victims appeared to have escaped the abduction, but new information suggests that they were only let go after an anonymous donation of $1 million was contributed toward the ransom. The crime group was also accused of abducting 7 clergy members, 2 of which were French citizens. They asked for another $1 million. The gang has also been found to specialize in the extortion of business, illegal trafficking, along with the Dominican Republic border and hijacking trucks. A number of leaders have been named by the FBI, with the current leader being Joseph Wilson, who uses the alias of Lanmo Senju. The second in command is a man who goes by Yan Yan. He received a life sentence in 2018 for armed robbery, homicide, illegal possession of a firearm, forcible confinement, and criminal association. There are more than 1,000 members of this crime group scattered along the outskirts of Port-au-Prince, and more youngsters are waiting in line to enroll. While the Bureau is looking for most of the members of the 400 Mawozo, their main focus has been on the leader, Joseph Wilson. It was he who engaged in the conspiracy of 2021 to kidnap 16 United States Christian missionaries and 1 Canadian missionary, and they were held for ransom. At the time, the victims had been traveling via bus. The group included 12 adults and 5 youngsters, and during the kidnapping, Wilson conferred with the other leaders, including Yan Yan, where they would agree upon the ransom terms. Wilson was the one to make the calls to the hostages' representatives, demanding payments from them. In 2022, he was indicted for 16 counts of hostage-taking and 1 count of conspiracy to commit hostage-taking. A reward of $1 to $3 million is being offered for any information that leads to the whereabouts, arrest, or conviction of Joseph Wilson. The fugitive was born in February of 1993 in Haiti. He has black hair and brown eyes. At the time that he went into hiding, he stood at a height of 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighed around 150 pounds. He's known to have various marks on his body, including a number of scars. He also has a tattoo of a skull on his right calf, a snake on his left calf, a sharpened blade on his right forearm, a spider web on his right shoulder. His left arm has a full sleeve with cursive writing, and his chest includes cursive writing and stars. Information regarding the 400 Mawozo gang leader can be directed to the United States FBI at 1-305-495-0956. Alternatively, tips can be submitted to tips.fbi.gov. In 2016, the United States saw a crucial presidential election. The election was held on the 8th of November of that year, when Republican Donald Trump lost the popular vote to Democrat Hillary Clinton. But he did win 30 states in the decisive electoral college with 304 votes, which allowed Trump to become the 45th president of the United States. But the presidential election of 2016 didn't come without interference. The interference came from the Internet Research Agency, or the IRA. The members sought to provoke and amplify social discord in the United States. Internal documents revealed an order that supported Trump's candidacy. At the time, the members of the IRA criticized Clinton and other candidates. From mid-2016, they organized rallies in the United States promoting Trump and opposing Clinton, posing as Americans and concealing their Russian background as they did so. According to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's indictment, which focuses on the St. Petersburg-based IRA, the group directly interfered with the election and political processes. The organization, consisting of 13 nationals, was found to have carried out various offensive cyber organizations. The Internet Research Agency was overseen by a management group and was organized into a number of departments, including a graphics department, data analysis, search engine optimization, and a finance department. Among the individuals to have carried out these acts was Putin's favorite chef. He's believed to be the mastermind financier behind the troll army that forced its way into social media with false news, harassing journalists, and arranging political demonstrations. The members also included Mikhail Bistrov, who ran the show and has since shut down its operations. His name is known to have appeared in another troll factory as well. The executive director behind the IRA was Mikhail Burchik, and the third in command was Alexandra Krylova. Described as the data geek was Anna Bogacheva and Sergei Polozov, working as the IT expert. We then come to the woman who has a $75,000 reward on her head, Maria Bovda. She's been accused of various crimes in which she attempted to defraud the United States. Bovda is wanted for not only impairing, but also obstructing and defeating the law functions of the Federal Election Commission, the United States Department of State, and the United States Department of Justice. Initially, she'd been working as the head of the IRA's translator project. Bovda would go on to create hundreds and hundreds of fake online personas. These personas were based on the stolen identities of the United States citizens. These were the actions taken in an effort to reach a significant number of Americans, the motive being to directly interfere with the United States political system, with the presidential election of 2016 included. The Russian nationals now find themselves wanted by the FBI ever since. A federal arrest warrant for Bovda has since been issued in the United States District Court. She's known to speak both Russian and English, and is believed to have a strong connection to Russia, where she's believed to be living under the alias of Masha. She was born in February of 1986 and is known to have brown hair and brown eyes. She's also described as having a slim build. Any information on the IRA members involved with the 2016 interference should be directed to the FBI's toll-free tip line at 1-800-225-5324, and tips can also be submitted online at tips.fbi.gov. It was August of 1996 when the Athol, Idaho neighborhood would be struck with tragedy. In this neighborhood lived 42-year-old Connie Marie Henry, 44-year-old Vernon Henry, their 18-year-old daughter, Heather Henry, and 3 more children. The Henry family home is located on the east side of Highway 95 and lies across from the Super G Maxi Mart. Connie and her children were being subjected to an enduring domestic violence situation. She and her children would be attacked and verbally abused by Vernon during their marriage. According to the children, there were major arguments that plagued the household on a daily basis, and on August 11th of 1996, it was no different. There'd been a heated and violent argument running through the household, and according to a witness, the fight erupted at 12:45 a.m. It isn't known exactly what they were fighting about to the sheriff's investigators, but during the debate, Connie told Vernon that she would no longer be putting up with the violence that he'd acted upon her and the children, and at this point she threatened to leave him. It was at this moment that Heather had arrived from home late that night with her boyfriend. 5 to 8 minutes later, tragedy struck. Vernon made way for a closet where he kept his firearm, and he grabbed it and made his way back to his wife and daughter, and he aimed the weapon and fired at them, claiming both of their lives. One of the quick-thinking children managed to dial 911 and reported what had just occurred. By the time the police arrived at the scene, it was already too late. Vernon had driven off, and the following morning, family and friends arrived at the home. Some of them cried while others stood there looking at the house that was still littered with bicycles and basketballs. One neighbor commented that Connie regularly babysat children at the home, and Vernon would sell cars for people right there from their front lawn. Heather would also work summers at the Silverwood theme park, which she had done for the past 3 seasons. The family was well known to the Idaho community. As the investigation into what happened at the home continued, authorities began piecing some things together. They believed that after firing at the women multiple times, the man behind the crime fled the home and made his way along US Highway 95. After speaking with friends of the family, they also discovered that none of them knew that any sort of domestic violence was going on. The police found no records of domestic violence reports in the home either. After further investigation, authorities concluded that Vernon planned the act in advance, and had even stashed supplies and money out in the woods that would secure his survival. He was known as a survivalist and anti-government. The fugitive took off with his 1980s maroon Toyota Camry with the license plate K112216. For years, the vehicle went undiscovered until recently when it was found in Washington. It was never revealed in what condition the vehicle was found in, or if it held any clues that may lead to the whereabouts of the criminal. Vernon hadn't been seen since that evening, and he left the residence armed with 3 firearms. A secret witness is offering a reward for information leading to the whereabouts of the fugitive. America's Most Wanted featured this case on the show and received 30 phone calls from people who believed that they'd seen the man in New York, California, Tennessee, and New Jersey. Police followed up on 2 promising leads, which took them to Ontario, but still he evaded arrest. Vernon Ray Henry is also known to have ties to Alaska, Nebraska, and Idaho. Investigators suspect that he could have traveled as far as Belize. This event remains one of Idaho's cold cases, with Vernon placed on a most wanted list for a double homicide in the first degree and the use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Any tips can be anonymously directed to the Idaho Cold Case tip line at 1-844-TIP-4040. Joshua Boyle was born in Ontario and attended the Rockaway Mennonite Collegiate. In 2005, he graduated from the University of Waterloo. Following the September 11th catastrophe, Boyle became interested in human rights issues, as well as the case of Omar Khadr, a Canadian who was being held in Guantanamo Bay.
and later he married Omar's sister, but they divorced after a year. During his teen years, Boyle met a Pennsylvania resident named Caitlin Coleman. The two were mutual fans of the Star Wars franchise and ended up marrying in 2011. Following this, they began their travels to Central America. They then moved to New Brunswick, where Boyle found a job as a municipal clerk. In July of 2012, the two started their travels through Russia and Central Asia. But for a reason unknown, they crossed into Afghanistan in October of that year. According to some sources, they wanted to help ordinary villagers in the area. Conflicting sources speak of a more spontaneous decision. On October 8th, Boyle's parents received a worrying email indicating that the couple was in an unsafe area. And right after this, they were captured by members of a Taliban-linked organization. At the time of her capture, Caitlin was pregnant and due in January. Unfortunately, she would be forced to have her child in captivity, where she would be held for the next 5 years. During this time, she would give birth to 2 children. Both Caitlin and Boyle would be subjected to various means of cruelty during their time there. It was not until 2 years later that the families of both parties got word that they were still alive. In September of 2017, U.S. intelligence received information about a vehicle that had been carrying the missing woman and her children. They were heading to Pakistan, and so SEAL Team 6 prepared for extradition. But suspicions about the accuracy of the information deterred any U.S. action. And so, on October 11th of that year, Pakistani forces headed out. They encountered the vehicle that the U.S. reported to the Pakistani government. The vehicle carried the kidnapped family. The troops managed to strike the tires, leaving the vehicle stranded. They moved in, rescuing the family, who would later be sent back to Canada. But during the rescue, despite opening fire on the kidnappers, some of them fled. And it's these unidentified kidnappers who have remained on the Federal Bureau of Investigation's most wanted list. During the 5 years, though, hostage videos began to emerge, and in one of them, Caitlin identified their kidnappers. The FBI is seeking information that may lead to the arrests and conviction of the men responsible for the 2012 kidnapping of the Canadian couple, who were met with torture and brutality during their 5 years in captivity. The Bureau prompts anyone who has information on the wanted fugitives responsible for this act to make contact with the FBI Washington Field Office at 202-278-2000 or the FBI tip line at 1-800-225-5324. Alternatively, any nearby American embassy or consulate can be notified, and all tips will remain anonymous. Our mysteries begin with the disappearance of Glenn Penny, a father, electrician, and potentially a wealthy man. This vanishing would be recognized as one of the most high-profile cases and the most intriguing. It was 2004. Glenn was 56 years old and residing in Polk County, Oregon, at 14970 Airlie Road. Earlier that year, his father had passed on, and arrangements for the estate were upcoming. He was planning on leaving his residence and heading to Oakland, California, to attend the hearing regarding the estate. It was through the estate that he was set to inherit old properties, rare coins, and a large sum of $1 million. Glenn planned the trip for the 4th of October. Just one day prior, in the late afternoon, he spoke with his neighbor, asking him if he could take care of his pet cat and collect the mail while he was away. That evening, he made contact with some friends who resided in California, telling them that he would be leaving early in the morning. But the day of the trip came and went, with Glenn's pickup truck still parked in the driveway. No one had heard from him. The concerned neighbor took note of the truck that still stood there days after he was due to leave for California, but saw nothing else unusual or out of place. Glenn was reported missing on the 6th of October by his neighbor. Investigators would later discover that the pickup truck was unlocked, packed with a suitcase, documentation, and the car keys inside. It was clear that he planned on heading out, but he never did. Investigators later found his cat in the home, whom he had yet to place in the care of his neighbor. Glenn, though, was nowhere to be seen. There had been no signs of a struggle and no evidence pointing to what may have happened to him. There were no indications that any other vehicle had driven into the driveway. The Polk County Sheriff's Office initiated an extensive air and ground search, but despite combing 53 square miles, they found no sign of Glenn Penny. Since his disappearance, there's been no activity on his bank account or his cell phone.
Those who knew the missing man claimed that he would never have walked away from the inheritance that he would be receiving. Authorities claim that there are people in Oregon who know what happened, but without the necessary confessions, the case will remain unsolved. One person of interest has been named, but there's no evidence to support it. It was Glenn's brother, Dale. They were said to have been arguing about a $1.5 million inheritance and the 75-25 split of their father's estate, leaving Glenn with the larger share. Friends of the missing man claimed that he was afraid of his brother. Glenn also told them that if anything were to happen to him, Dale would be behind it. That being said, the brother had an alibi. He was in Brandon at the time of the disappearance, a statement that was corroborated by witnesses. He also knew that he would not have financially benefited from his brother's passing. In the end, Dale was awarded the initial share of the estate, as discussed, $29,000, and Glenn's daughter received the rest of it. While foul play is suspected in this case, the circumstances surrounding it remain unclear, as the disappearance reaches its 20th anniversary. Glenn Penny is described as a Caucasian male born in 1948. At the time he went missing, he had graying brown hair and green eyes. He was known to wear eyeglasses. Glenn stood at a height of 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighed between 185 and 200 pounds. If anyone has any information regarding this missing person, you're asked to make contact with the Polk County Sheriff's Office at 503-623-9251. Making the list of the world's 100 top most influential people in 2010 was the British graffiti master, painter, and activist Banksy. No one knows who he is, but he has become one of the most prominent and leading figures that sparked inspiration in the minds of similar activist artists. Over the years, we've seen out-of-place art erected by artists who would much rather stay anonymous. This is precisely what happened in Borrowdale of the Lake District in Cumberland, England. The anonymous artist has been dubbed the Borrowdale Banksy. The Lake District expanse has long inspired artists for ages. In recent years, another anonymous individual has popped up and begun to establish a number of stone creations in the area. These structures are made of flat slate that vary in size. They're packed together, forming an upright circle, seemingly defying gravity. One appeared on Castle Crag and another on Raven Crag. According to the local village hall, another had been formed in Dalehead. The Borrowdale Institute believes that these are the works of an incredibly talented and very patient person. Locals compared the artist to Banksy due to his anonymity. His sculptures have been referred to as the elusive stone circles, which have been carefully constructed overlooking the Borrowdale Valley. The first of the mysterious structures was discovered in May of 2021 by the photographer Carl Halliday. More structures like this one have dotted areas for the next 2 years. One of the creations in Buttermere became a tourist attraction, but was later toppled over. Some locals are reluctant to reveal the locations of the other sculptures for this reason. Initially, some had thought that these were the works of the local Windermere sculptor Sean Williamson, who would confirm that they were not his. The newest installation was found in 2023. The anonymous sculptor created an arch that's propped up against a jagged wall. It stands 2 feet tall, a smaller piece than what he's created before. There is fear, though, about these installations attracting too many tourists, especially amateur climbers who may attempt to navigate the rocky cliffs. Concerns of the slate build toppling over onto someone are also among the fears. Despite the issues that the structures may pose, Borrowdale has remained in good spirits about the anonymous artist, and has left the sculptures standing, unlike other areas in the world where unauthorized art is destroyed or removed. Rumors abound on social media regarding the anonymous artist and the intricate designs, but no one has claimed responsibility for them just yet. Some have said that they stumbled upon the very artist at work, while others claim that at least 2 people would be needed to put the arches together. Clive Rowlandson, one of the admirers of the art, doesn't know who the artist is, but is aware of a few locals who could be behind it. But still, the Borrowdale Banksy remains an enduring mystery. The snowy Alaskan expanse has long been a mysterious, cold and dark place. The icy plains hold eerie secrets and cryptic ongoings. There's one village in particular at the center of the mystery: Nome. Between 1960 and 2004, This remote town saw 24 residents mysteriously vanish, never to be seen again. These disappearances were enough to spark a nationwide uproar. Universal Pictures hopped on the opportunity to make a major motion picture based on the enigmatic vanishings. Nome was known as the commercial hub of Northwest Alaska. It was the closest thing to a large city for miles, consisting of just over 3,500 individuals. But it was this town that many village leaders from Alaska and Siberia warned others to stay away from. Delbert of Savunga, a tribal leader, told Anchorage Daily News that this village is where people disappear. It isn't known if 21-year-old Eric Apatiki had heard these warnings, but he would make up one of the 24 residents to vanish. Eric was from a tribal village situated on St. Lawrence Island. It was October of 2004, and he'd been setting out on his anticipated trip to Nome. He was heading there to visit his girlfriend, who was expecting a baby at the time. He also wanted to cash his permanent fund dividend check. No one knew that when the young man left his home, he would never be seen or heard from again. Eric wasn't the first person to go missing here, nor will he be the last. Mostly men are among the missing from Nome and neighboring villages who have disappeared without a trace. Many speculations have come about in an attempt to explain what happened to the missing people. This includes the idea that there was a homicidal maniac on the loose. Others refer to the harsh environment or possibly the involvement of UFOs. While the reason behind the disappearances remains unclear, one thing is for certain. They caught the attention of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Rumors of the missing residents of Nome have been in circulation for years, but it had gone unnoticed by the authorities. Delbert of Savunga had been calling for an investigation into these disappearances as early as 1998. It wasn't until a Native American woman was met with a violent act of a local Nome police officer that the disappearances would gain notoriety. Many would think that the involvement of the FBI would lead to answers, but the best conclusion they came to was that the disappearances were the result of the harsh environment. Even now, locals are disappearing, with the most recent ones occurring in 2016 and 2020. A 33-year-old named Florence vanished without explanation. It was the 31st of August in 2020 when Florence was last seen leaving her West Beach tent. This area was a popular campground during summertime. Later into the investigation, authorities uncovered Florence's shoes, socks, and jacket, but no other evidence as to where she would be ever surfaced, and she remains missing to this day. Foul play is suspected in this case, and the investigation remains ongoing. The missing Alaska native is said to have black hair and brown eyes. She stands at a height of 5 feet and 2 inches tall and weighs around 142 pounds. Information regarding any of the missing Alaskan individuals should be directed to the Nome Police Department at 907-443-5262. Back in the 1950s, a farmer from the Chua town near Lake Titicaca unearthed a strange artifact that would continue to puzzle archaeologists and bewilder historians. The farmer discovered the item accidentally on the Manhone family property. The site hadn't been studied thoroughly for artifacts before, which is why this mysterious place had been undiscovered. The earthen brown Fuente magma bowl had been engraved with a language that took quite some time to decipher. It also depicted bears and other anthropomorphic characters. The stone vessel is something odd, and is one among a few of the most disputed artifacts of South America. This is because of the inscription that it bears. The cuneiform was deciphered by Dr. Alberto Marini, who declared it to be Sumerian. After further examination by Dr. Clyde A. Winters, it was found that the inscriptions were Proto-Sumerian. The script was a writing form that many ancient cultures used, and the writing that adorned the bowl read as follows, saying, quote, "Approach the future one endowed with great protection, the great Nia, to establish purity, establish gladness, establish character. Use this talisman to sprout unique advice at the temple. The righteous shrine, anoint this shrine. The leaders take an oath to establish purity, a favorable oracle, and to establish character. O leader of the cult, open up a unique light for all who wish for a noble life." The script indicated that the Fuente magma bowl may have been used as libations to the goddess Nia. The figure seen on the bowl with outstretched arms and legs The goddess pose is believed to support Winter's translations. The reason that there's much controversy regarding the bowl is because of the questions that have risen about a link between the Sumerians and the ancient denizens of the Andes, who were separated by thousands of miles. If the translation is correct, it may have some crucial implications for the knowledge that we have of Sumerian civilization and Bolivia's ancient culture. How could a Proto-Sumerian engraved bowl be discovered near Lake Titicaca, thousands of miles away from where the Sumerian people lived? Historians and archaeologists can only theorize how this came to be. Bernardo Biados suggested that there was a Sumerian migration, placing the group in Bolivia after 2500 BC. But the idea of Sumerians in Bolivia has sparked much debate among scholars. Yuri Leverato posited that the Sumerian civilization had a great influence on the people of the plateau, particularly in the means of language. In support of this theory, linguists have found similarities between the Proto-Sumerian and other languages. Alexander H. Joff, however, believes that the inscriptions decorating the bowl are a mere geometric filler, deliberate gibberish. Despite the theories and the translations, the Fuente Magma Bowl remains a contentious topic in the historical community. Further archaeological research may aid in unraveling the story, but for now, it remains an enigmatic artifact. Valery Sifsov was born in 1968 to a family with another 5 children. She belongs to the Yupik Inupiaq tribe and grew up in the Anderson and Anchorage area of Alaska. Valerie would regularly travel to Dillingham to help out with the family business. In 2012, the 43-year-old was living in Anchorage after having spent some time in Seattle with her long-term boyfriend, whom she brought along with her to the ice-covered fields. It was the 7th of July when the couple decided to go camping at the Granite Creek Campground, situated at mile 64 on Seward Highway, outside of the Girdwood Resort. Around midnight, though, the two would get into an argument that would result in Valerie leaving the campsite, leaving all of her personal belongings behind. These belongings included her cell phone, her ID, and her keys. Her boyfriend searched for her and left the campground the next day, hoping that she would return home. He wouldn't report her missing until the 11th of July. He would also inform the family, prompting Viktor Sifsov and his wife, Valerie's parents, to head out to the area. They flew down immediately and headed out to Granite Creek, where a search would be mobilized. During that week, the South Central Alaska area was cold and rainy. Victor's concerns about his daughter's well-being surged, believing she was hurt or abducted. Despite launching an immediate search, investigators didn't find a single trace of her until a month later. A kayaker had been in 6 Mile Creek and came across a green tank top, and it was Valerie's. In October, her family uncovered another clothing item, a sweatshirt, at the edge of the 6 Mile Creek. Authorities documented the area and retrieved the items of clothing, but since then the case has gone cold. No further items have washed ashore, and no trace of Valerie has been found since. Every clue was followed up on, miles of roads were walked, and woods were scoured, but to no avail. The Native American woman has been described as having black hair and brown eyes, and she's said to be 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighs around 120 pounds. She's known as Val to most and has pierced ears and a scar on her abdomen. Valerie Sifsov was last seen wearing a DKNY hoodie, a green tank top, blue sweatpants, and black calf boots, as well as Prada sunglasses with a silver frame. Any information regarding the missing person should be directed to the Alaska State Troopers at 907-783-0972. Described as one of the most mysterious artworks of all time is the portrait of Giovanni Arnolfini and his wife, painted by Jan van Eyck in 1434. Oil paintings decorated an oak panel, an artwork celebrated for its originality, as well as its incredibly complex iconography. So complex are the hidden symbols that the entirety of the painting has gone uninterpreted even today. This mysterious double portrait is commonly referred to as the Arnolfini Portrait. The scene is set in the bedchamber of a Flemish house with its occupants, Giovanni di Nicolau Arnolfini, a merchant from Lucca, along with his wife. Each aspect of the painting has led to various theories and unconfirmed interpretations. Something that quickly becomes obvious is that the woman in the painting is pregnant, except she's not. Painting or sculpting a pregnancy violated this period's artistic customs. The female figure has gathered up her extensive skirts, which she holds against her waist, creating an illusion. But there are other references to childbirth being present in the painting. The symbolism of pregnancy and expectation are hidden within the other figures. This includes the ripened fruit on the windowsill and the wooden statue of Saint Margaret, who's the patron saint of childbirth. Whether or not the woman is expecting a child remains a topic of debate, but a new question has also been proposed. The question isn't if she's pregnant, but why she appears to be. The initial interpretations of the painting were widely accepted as the Arnolfini wedding portrait, but the true depiction of the two characters remains a topic of debate among scholars. This is because records showed that the couple only married in 1447, 13 years after the portrait was completed. It was later theorized that the female figure was actually Giovanni's late wife, who passed just 1 year prior to the painting's date. An art historian, Margaret Coster, points to the hands when establishing this theory. The joining of the two figures' hands is known as the dexterum function, a gesture that is notable in ancient Roman reliefs where women and men hold their right hands together in union. Coster believes that the hands, in this case, may signify Giovanni's inability to let go of his dearly departed, while the gargoyle represents doom. At the couple's feet, we see a small hairy dog, which too raises debate regarding the meaning behind the portrait. Dogs are believed to represent fidelity and loyalty. These animals are seen on female tombs of ancient Roman times, representing a guide into the afterlife. Coster believes that this is why the dog is standing so close to the female character, if she really is Giovanni's deceased wife. Then, another clue points us in the direction that is a wedding portrait. It's the artist's signature. The text translates to Jan van Eyck was here. Could this have been a literal marriage certificate that Eyck signed as a witness with his name and date? This is what other art enthusiasts believe. The text also appears above the background mirror. In the mirror, two figures can be seen, perhaps the artist himself along with another witness. The mirror has another clue that supports Coster's theory. The object is decorated with scenes from the Passion of Christ. The art historian also points out that the scenes of resurrection are found on the side of the female. This perspective seems to confirm that the portrait is done as memorabilia. Debate, though, continues. Another art historian and professor, Margaret Carroll, suggests that this double portrait is actually a husband signing over his business dealing with his wife. She suggests that men who travel for business would often leave the daily dealings of their business with their significant other, which is done through legal documentation or agreement. One piece of evidence for this theory is the cherry tree outside the window. Since Giovanni is the closest to the window, this may represent his traveling work duties. The wife stands nearer to the bed, which is indicative of her duties in caring for the household. What remains undisputed in the portrait is the large number of objects that represent wealth and luxury. This includes the oranges that are placed on the right table. Oranges did not grow in the area of Burgess, and only wealthy homes would have been able to afford the imported fruits. Further evidence for this is the elaborate wood carvings on the bed frame, the imported rug, and the rich furnishings. The addition of these items in the painting reveals important significance to either the commissioner or the artist. Due to their specific placement, many theories have emerged. The questions remain: why is the artist's signature above the mirror on the wall? And why does it look more like a signature on paper than a signature on a piece of art? Who are the reflected figures in the mirror? Is the painting a depiction of marriage, or is it a memorial of the departed? The mystery of the Arnolfini portrait presses on and has been left to interpretation. It remains a subject of much debate, with no confirmation about what it depicts ever being found. 36-year-old Joseph Balderas is another Alaskan resident to have disappeared in Nome, further adding to the enduring mystery of those who disappear in the Alaskan wilderness. Nome is known for its dog sled racing, as well as its gold rush history. Aside from this, it's also the place of many disappearances that are left unexplained. Joseph had grown up in Lubbock, Texas, with 4 siblings. In 2014, he moved from Texas to Nome, Alaska for a job. He was also engaged to Megan Ryder at the time. The couple were planning to move to Juneau later on, where Joseph would start his own business. According to their family, he was an outdoorsman who enjoyed fishing, hiking, and participating in community events. He was enjoying the Alaskan lifestyle, but things would take a turn in 2016. On the 24th of June of that year, the Nome 2nd District Court closed for the weekend. It was here that Joseph was working as a law clerk. He clocked out, hopped in his truck, and drove off. It's uncertain as to whether or not he intended to return the following week because he never showed up. 3 days later, one of his colleagues, Tracy Bui, heard that Joseph's fiancée had called the police because she was unable to get a hold of Joseph. The colleague had noticed his absence in the workplace too, and promptly reported him missing. The call that Tracy made to the police department would change the family forever. On the 27th of June, the same day that he was reported missing, Joseph's truck was found abandoned. It was located at mile 44 of the Nome Council Highway, and upon closer inspection, Alaska State Troopers noticed something unusual. The truck was unlocked, and inside it, they found a backpack of fishing accessories, a pair of waders, and boots, along with keys. Troopers latched on to the idea that he'd been hiking in the area, since he was an avid outdoorsman who embraced the Alaskan life. The Nome Search and Rescue, as well as the U.S. Coast Guard, spent several days searching for the missing man. With no signs of Joseph popping up, they opted to suspend the search by the 6th of July. But further inquest into the disappearance revealed something that may have been crucial. When police had initially questioned Joseph's roommate, Jake Stittenbanks, he claimed to have gone bridge jumping, but it was found that this was a lie. Police were able to collect data from Jake's phone, which revealed that he had texted his two friends, Tyler and Emery, telling them that he would need to use them in a story for the state trooper. When he was confronted about this inconsistency, Jake admitted to lying and said he was just nervous. Subsequently, an investigation of the home ensued, but no indication of foul play was found there. Theories began to circulate across town, and some pointed to a bear attack or something much more sinister. But a private investigator, Andy Clamser, quickly discounted such theories. Clamser stated that if it were a bear attack, there would be a clear indication of it. Without any evidence, though, the circumstances surrounding Joseph Baldera's disappearance couldn't be determined. Joseph has been described as having black hair and brown eyes. He's 6 foot 1 inches tall and weighs approximately 185 pounds. He was last seen wearing a green and gray shirt, khaki cargo pants, sneakers with a green tread, and was carrying a green backpack. Any information about this missing person should be directed to the Nome, Alaska State Troopers at 907-443-2835 with incident number AK16046-211. The Great Hudson Arc is a curved segment that can be found on the southeastern shore of Hudson Bay in Canada. It extends from the Hopewell Islands to Long Island. The perfect circular arc covers more than 160 degrees of a 450-kilometer circle, but this smooth, sweeping curve seems too perfect to be a natural construct. So what caused this perfect arc to form on the edge of a continent? Geological mysteries are plentiful, but most of them are often solved by geologists and scientists, but this one has remained an enduring enigma. The symmetry of the arc grabbed the attention of researchers and scholars, sparking a myriad of theories. In the 1950s, the most obvious answer was proposed, one that would potentially explain how the arc was formed. The geological formation was attributed to a large celestial fingerprint. Scientists believed it was a crater that formed from the impact of an outer space object that was sent hurling toward Earth, but there existed no geological evidence for this. For the past 50 years, the arc has been the subject of debate. The 1950s theory was a tantalizing idea when the moon's surface is taken into consideration. The theory gained a whole lot of traction, one that was supported by a Canadian astrophysicist in the 1960s. Carlisle Beals proposed that the arc could be the rim of an ancient impact. But this theory faced many challenges. In 1972, two geophysicists, Robert S. Deitz and J. Paul Barringer, headed out on an expedition in search of evidence to support the theory. The two examined each rock formation that lined the arc. They looked for signs of an impact, including shattered cones, melted rock, and radial fractures. What they found, though, was absolutely nothing. There was no evidence there to support the hypothesis. The absence of these crucial geological markers suggested an alternative origin, and so the theory of a celestial scar faded, and scientists turned their views to the forces of the Earth itself. They pointed to an ancient geological drama called the Trans-Hudson Orogeny. Almost 2 billion years ago, large landmasses collided, which buckled and folded the Earth's crust. This caused the crust to flex downward, resulting in a depression known as the Foreland Basin. In the early 1990s, scientists were able to gather data that supported the idea. They found subtle changes in the gravity field that aligned with the concept of the outer layer bending. The hypothesis suggested that the arc marked a boundary between two geological regions, which were the Belcher Fold Belt and the Superior Craton. Some geologists agree with both theories, suggesting that the crater is the result of an impact that has become hidden by the Trans-Hudson Orogeny. Others propose the idea that this is where old landmasses are pulled apart. Despite these explanations, though, the mystery of the Great Hudson Arc is ongoing. John Dax Dunn, a former Marine, was born on the 1st of June in 1980. He would later get married and have 4 children with his wife. He was living in a house in Noonan, Georgia, where he also worked as an aircraft mechanic. It was this disappearance that would become one of the few to be described as a true mystery. On the 13th of February, 2020, the 40-year-old told his family that he was heading out on a 4-day fishing trip near Tampa alone. At 4:30 that afternoon, he left his residence. On the 14th of February, Dax completed his long journey from Georgia to Florida in his white 2013 Nissan Frontier. It would later be found that he used his debit card that day to make a purchase in Midway, which is just off Interstate 10. The day after that, it was found that he'd stopped at a Circle K gas station on Highway 19S in Inglis. He made another purchase with his debit card, which included gas, snacks, and some energy drinks. Dax would also rent a motel room in the area, and 2 days after that, a 10.5-foot-long lime green kayak. The kayak came from Paddles Outdoor Rentals in Crystal River, Florida, a canoe and kayak service. But Dax would never return home from his weekend journey, and he hasn't been seen or heard from again. On the 18th of February, his family began to worry when he didn't show up for work, and a missing person report was filed with the Coweta County Sheriff's Office. It wasn't until the 3rd of March that the authorities found Dax's abandoned pickup truck with a Georgia license plate hidden among the trees near a boat ramp at the end of County Road 40 in Yankeetown. What was strange, though, was that on the 27th of February, the truck hadn't been there upon the initial search. Deputies only checked the scene again when they were notified of a suspicious vehicle that was left in the trees. In the bed of the truck were fishing rods, reels, a travel bag full of clothes, and a cooler box. There was no evidence of foul play in or around the vehicle, which had also been locked. Missing from the scene were Dax's wallet, keys, and firearm. The authorities decided to leave the vehicle there for another few days in hopes that the owner, or someone who may be involved in his disappearance, would return to it, but no one ever did. The life vest and kayak that he rented were never returned to the rental service and were also missing. There's been no activity on his phone records and social media since the 15th of February of 2020. There were no means or motive to suspect foul play. Dax was just gone. The family is offering a $1,000 reward for any information that leads to the man's whereabouts. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance remain unclear, and the case is still unsolved. Any information that may lead to the whereabouts of this missing person should be directed to the Coweta County Sheriff's Office at 770-253-1502. The subject of ghosts and their existence is among one of the most debated topics in the history of the world. This is because some people have claimed to see the spirits of the deceased, while others have never had such an outlandish experience. Despite the fact that there's no scientific evidence to prove the existence of ghosts, many maintain that they have indeed seen the supernatural. 45% of Americans believe in ghosts, while 18% of them have come into direct contact with the spirits. This presents a significant number for what the remainder believe is a total hoax. The strange thing is, we still don't know why this phenomenon occurs. Science hasn't been able to explain why people see the ghost world and why some others don't. Many theories have been stirred into existence in an attempt to explain this unique sight, but they remain only theories.
The most well-known theory is that of the fear frequency. Humans are unable to hear frequencies that are below 20 Hz. The human body, on the other hand, can still sense the frequencies. This can cause uneasiness, chills, and fear. In fact, this theory helped solve a local ghost story on the Coventry University campus. Paranormal enthusiasts who journey along with the various ghostly documentaries or supernatural movies may have noted the EMF readers. EMF readers supposedly detect paranormal energy through electromagnetic fields. Of course, these readers are unreliable, given the fact that absolutely anything can set them off, like camera batteries, cell phones, and unheard frequencies. If the fear frequency, though, was right, then wouldn't everyone be affected by it, and not just a select few? Another plausible theory as to why some may see ghosts is because of mold and fungus. Often, ghostly beings are seen by those who venture into decrepit hospitals and abandoned houses. These places are often caked in black mold, possibly asbestos, and even rye ergot. Scientists have found links between exposure to toxic molds and psychological disorders. Serving as an example to this idea is the demonic activity that paranormal investigators refer to. In cases like these, the person may feel sick, have a headache, lightheadedness, or a choking sensation, and when they leave the area, they often feel instantly better. Does this theory explain the ghostly apparitions that one may see in their house? Well, the answer is yes. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health Centers for Disease Control and Prevention found that around 47% of United States homes are afflicted with mold and dampness. This is 2% higher than the 45% of Americans who believe in ghosts, and there may be a correlation there. Scientists have also pointed to unprocessed trauma, brain glitches, energy displacement, positive ions, negative ions, and pareidolia. Some of the hypotheses have been tested in controlled environments, including the artificial haunted room that tested the participants by exposing them to infrasound and electromagnetism. But even if the fields weren't on, the people inside still experienced some form of paranormal activity. This is the power of suggestibility, another theory to explain why people see ghosts. Despite all these scientifically backed up theories, the question remains, why do these specific conditions affect one control group and not the other? The Chinese village known as Dingwuling is dotted with ponds and pools of water, and shrouded in lush vegetation. The perfect conditions for the breeding grounds of the most annoying critters on Earth, mosquitoes. The conditions of the village, especially during summertime, would allow the place to teem with little insects. Except Dingwuling hasn't seen any mosquitoes for at least a century. Situated 700 meters above sea level and nestled comfortably on a mountain in the ancient city of Chengding in the Fujian province is the small village that houses the Hakka minority, a community of people with an incredibly rich history and culture. Reminiscent of this are their unique stone houses, but in more recent years, the scenic village's history and culture have been overshadowed by an enduring mystery. The mystery of the mosquitoes who dare not stick their tiny legs into the area. The media is enhancing the mystery of lack of mosquitoes, leaving the world completely confounded by them. The village has reported that they've not seen a single mosquito for several decades. It hasn't been established if scientists ever carried out a thorough investigation to unravel the enigma, but in the interim, the inhabitants have theorized their own explanation. Locals believe that the lack of mosquitoes is due to the toad-shaped stone that lies just outside the village. This village is supposedly a representation of the toad god, who's perhaps warding off the thirsty insects. For generations, the locals have come together to sweep and clean the sacred rock that they also worship. An alternative explanation has been attributed to garbage or the lack thereof. The residents of Dingwuling are said to collect their garbage and bury it on the hillside nearby, which some believe may be keeping the mosquitoes at bay, making the area a lot cleaner and less attractive for the bugs. In 2016, the People's Daily, a Chinese newspaper, released an article relaying the strange Mosquito-Free Village enigma. It was in this article that locals hoped that scientists would give a definitive answer, one that would place the village right on the tourist map. But there's since been no new information about the village and its ongoing mystery, which still leaves us with no answers.
According to one news article, there have been countless studies supposedly conducted by scientists in an attempt to explain the secret hidden within the ancient village. What these studies entailed hasn't been established. When stepping into Dingwaling, aside from the architecture, not much jumps out to the average person. The area is reminiscent of any other rural village, with low roofs, fresh air, and a quiet atmosphere. It isn't until you start realizing that you're not itching or hearing a high-pitched whine that you come to understand how truly unique the place is. Adding to the mystery is the clarification that the area has only been mosquito-free for just under a century. This indicates that the insects did once swarm there, looking for breeding grounds and food. Something must have changed that chased them away, and since the rock formation of the toad has always been there, perhaps the toad god isn't the answer after all. Something was altered in this landscape, and no one knows what it is except for the mosquitoes. Situated on the Acropolis of Athens is a great temple known as the Parthenon. It was erected between 447 and 432 BC, the golden age of Pericles. The temple was devoted to the patron deity Athena, in which the Athena Parthenos statue would be built. The statue was, of course, a tribute to the deity, who the inhabitants worshipped as the goddess of wisdom, war, and craft. While the entire temple was richly decorated, the most important sculpture was the giant depiction of the goddess. According to Pliny, she stood 26 cubits tall, the equivalent of 11.5 meters. The skin areas were carved from ivory, while the rest was made from gold. 1,140 kilograms of it, which was wrapped around a wooden core. The gold parts were easily removable should financial necessity present itself. Experts estimated that the statue cost the city somewhere around 5,000 talents, which would be somewhere in the vicinity of $14 billion today. This cost exceeded the amount needed to construct the Parthenon itself, making it a truly large sum of money. The statue was made by the famed sculptor Phidias, who had also created the statue of Zeus at Olympia. Athena was represented as an upright figure wearing a helmet, a peplos, and a breastplate. Her right hand was stretched out, holding a life-sized Nike, the personification of victory, while her left hand rested upon a shield. Leaning against her left arm was a spear, while a serpent coiled up at her feet. Sometime in the first millennium, though, the Athena Parthenos disappeared at an unknown date. It's for this reason that the statue is a mystery. The sculpture stood in its place until the temple fell to the Byzantines. This was the first Christian empire, one that outlawed paganism, which led to the fall of Greek reign. Even though the temple was converted to a church, historical records indicate that the Athena Parthenos was already gone by that time. Some believe that it was subjected to a fire in the 3rd century, but there are other records of it being restored, leaving the fate of the Athena statue unknown. Many copies of this ancient piece of art were produced. They were based on the written accounts of what the original Athena of Parthenos looked like. Some have theorized that the gold that adorned the statue's decorations may have been melted down to mint coins, but evidence supporting this idea has never been found. But there does exist a story involving a man named Lesher, who waged war and was said to be short on funds to pay his soldiers. Hence the idea that he had stolen the plates from the statue and made them into coins. If this account is true, then that still leaves the ivory and wooden core. It's guessed that after the temple was engulfed in flames, the statue was destroyed, after which replicas were made using the surviving pieces. But again though, this hypothesis cannot be confirmed, and there exists no evidence backing up the claims. Sometime in the first millennium, the statue simply disappeared from all historical records. No account has indicated that she was dismantled or that parts were reused in replicas. The Athena Parthenos was just gone. Historians and enthusiasts have since remained confused by the sculpture's sudden and enigmatic disappearance. Odzun is a small village in the Lori region that's referred to as a village that hangs from the clouds. Houses with tiled roofs lie high in the hills, among endless fields of wheat, corn, and sunflowers that seem to stretch to the rim of the gorge. This area is also one that holds some mystery and intrigue for visitors. On the road to an old-style Odzun church, one may catch a glimpse of an unusual structure that emerges from the ground to the northeast. The structure is known as the Obelisk of Odzun, a strange creation shrouded in mystery. It's formed from two stelae that are framed by standing arches atop a platform. The construct appears almost out of place as it balances on the edge of a steep drop. It was said to be unique in Armenia, and only one other one like it exists. It serves as a fascinating landmark for Lori, perched on the plateau that drops abruptly into the gorge that was formed by the Debed River. The origins of the double stelae structure remain mysterious and unknown. Its purpose is just as enigmatic and endures as a subject of debate. Some suggest that it resembles a funerary monument, consistent with the period in which it was constructed. On one side of the obelisk, carvings penetrate the stone, depicting both Old and New Testament scenes, along with the conversion of religion. One hypothesis regarding its origins places the structure in the 4th century, during which there was a clash of factions. The obelisk is said to be an establishment in honor of the bravery that both of these factions had shown. The scholars point to the bust of the religious figure in support of the hypothesis. It's adorned with snakes that are held by two angelic figures. These figures hint toward biblical writings that very seldom appear conjoined, specifically in Armenian iconography. Before the structure are various stone blocks that emerge from the ground. They bear a resemblance to headstones engulfed by the earth. The old church and ancient obelisk serve as a captivating ensemble. The basilica is also home to more recent monuments that reflect a different chapter of Armenia's history, one that was influenced by communism. Each inscription and each monument further adds to the mystery of the area, forcing people to question what happened there. In March of 1958, Lila Wadi Buereten was born in Guyana, South America. She was known to most as Lila, and later in life she would move to Toronto, Canada, before relocating again to Long Island, New York in the early 80s. It was here that Lila and her nephew, who was known to most as Moses, rented an old warehouse. Moses was born in December of 1962 in Guyana. He later moved to Toronto, where he attended college, before moving with his aunt and establishing the warehouse. At this warehouse, she would care for wild birds that had been imported from Guyana. The birds would need to be quarantined for 30 days. The two relatives moved again in 1992, this time to Florida. Here, they rented a ranch on Velasquez Road, continued with their bird imports, and began to breed exotic species of macaws, parrots, and toucans. Lila would later take care of the creatures while Moses tended to the ranch. The two lived privately and rarely interacted with the aviculture community. They were living peacefully at the ranch, tending to their birds, and making a living until the 4th of June in 1994, when a delivery man from the Bird Haven Feed Company arrived at the residence to deliver the weekly food supply, and no one came out to meet him. So he hopped the fence and looked around for both Lila and Moses, but they were nowhere to be found. The driver ended up piling the food in front of the gate, and the following day he returned only to find that the food was still outside. This caused concern, and he promptly notified the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department. But the case, however, evaded investigation for a whole 10 days. This was because the case's jurisdiction was swapped between the police department, the Palm Beach County Animal Control, and the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission. When officers finally arrived at the scene, they discovered birds succumbing to starvation and dehydration. Animal experts took charge of the remaining birds, and they found $700,000 worth of wild birds inside. Detectives searched for Lila, but she was nowhere to be found. They soon discovered that Moses, along with two ranch hands, Dajit Gobin and Roland Ayoum, were also missing. 2 days after the investigation was launched, Roland was located in New York City. He explained that he quit working at the ranch just 2 weeks prior to the disappearances, but he did recount a story told to him by Daljit. According to the ranch hand, on the 4th or 5th of June, he'd witnessed two unknown men forcibly directing the two missing people into a white van, along with a few of the birds. The authorities later learned that Moses was planning to import some reptiles from Africa and borrow some cash from what had been described as underworld figures. Police suspected that the two had been abducted, but aside from the witness testimony, they found no evidence that this was the case. Investigators began looking into the missing farmhand as well and discovered that Gobin had been arrested and later released from custody. After this event, though, he vanished and is wanted for questioning. He's not considered a suspect, but was said to have witnessed an alleged abduction. Some have theorized that Moses' business dealings may have landed the two missing people in trouble. Others suggest that the suspects were trying to steal some very expensive birds. Moses' mother and Lila's sister, Mahadi, tried to buy the birds back from the government as family property, but were met with a $180,000 bill. The birds would later be auctioned off as ordered by the Florida judge in an effort to raise money. While foul play is suspected in the case of the missing bird breeders, no evidence has pointed investigators in the right direction. The circumstances surrounding the disappearances remain unclear. Lila was 36 years old at the time. She's described as an Asian female of Guyanese descent with black hair and brown eyes. She's said to be a height of 5 feet and 5 inches tall and weighs around 115 pounds. Both of her ears are pierced. Moses was 31 when he disappeared, and he's described as an Asian male of Guyanese descent with black hair and brown eyes. He's said to be a height of 5 foot 7 inches and weighed about 165 pounds. Investigating the two disappearances is the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department, who can be reached at 561-688-3000, to which any tips and information should be directed. On the 22nd of October in 1976, Layla Dawn Atkins was born. She was later engaged in a relationship with a man named Danny. The couple married, but less than a year later they separated. During their time together, they had 2 daughters. In 2008, though, Layla didn't have custody of either of them. One of them was living with Danny, while the other lived with their aunt. In September of that same year, Layla would move in with the man in the 11,200 block of Shelby County 41 in Leeds, Alabama. But her family aren't certain about the nature of the relationship that she had with this man. At this time, Layla had a job at a Subway in Moody and had remained in close contact with her relatives and daughters. She spoke with her family at least once a week and visited them monthly. But after not hearing from her for 2 months, the family became concerned. But it wasn't until they received a returned Christmas gift that they'd sent to her that they really began to worry. On the 21st of January, 2009, Layla's brother and her sister-in-law reported her missing. Prior to vanishing, she'd been sending letters to her family. She spoke of her plans to get a new job, cook a Thanksgiving dinner, and move to a new apartment. These letters were indicative that Layla was planning for the future. It's for this reason that her family does not believe that she vanished willingly. 32-year-old Layla Atkins was last seen at her residence in Alabama, and she didn't have a car and her cell phone hadn't been used since the 13th of November in 2008. The missing woman's family contacted the unidentified housemate, who explained that she had moved out of the apartment. And after this contact was made, the man moved out as well. Investigators headed over to the now empty house and found no indication there of Layla. Her belongings were all gone. When police tracked down the housemate who was in Huntsville, he told them that they should look for her in Texas. According to him, they'd been talking to someone who lived in that area. Houston detectives managed to find the man that she'd been speaking to, but determined he had no contact with her in years. The man that Layla had moved in with refused a polygraph test, while her ex-husband complied to one. One of Layla's daughters, Caitlin, recalled her last memory of her mother. Her grandfather and she were heading to the Subway in Moody to pick her up. They went to Walmart together and were looking at a few things. This was around the time that the new Tinkerbell movies had come out, and Layla decided to purchase one of them. Caitlin explained that everything appeared fine and nothing was out of the ordinary. She wishes that the authorities were notified of her mother's disappearance a whole lot sooner. At the time of her disappearance, Layla Atkins was 32 years old. She stood at a height of 5 feet 11 inches and weighed around 120 pounds. She's described as a Caucasian female with blonde hair and blue eyes. She sometimes uses her maiden name, Blizzard. Both of her ears are pierced, and she has a tattoo on the left side of her chest that takes the formation of the letter M. Any information regarding this missing person should be directed to the Shelby County Sheriff's Office at 205-669-4181. Nancy Troque Garcia was born in Mexico and grew up in a family of 5 children. In 2011, she relocated to the United States with her fiancé, but their marriage was short-lived. Sometime later, she was established as a U.S. citizen and began working in a local furniture factory, where she would work for the next 3 years. In 2018, Nancy set up her apartment in Asheboro, North Carolina. At this time, she separated from her ex-boyfriend and their young daughter, whom she would visit. On the 19th of May in 2018, she and her daughter headed out to a birthday party. According to her friends, she was acting normal that day. In fact, she was having a really good time. The next day, she dropped her daughter off with the ex-boyfriend at his East Balford Avenue residence. That same day, though, the 28-year-old woman would vanish. She was last seen in Ashboro, where she visited her ex-boyfriend's sister, whom she asked for help to look after their child. She told the sister that she needed to head out to Mexico to see her mother, who was ill at the time. And this was the last time that anyone ever saw Nancy. She never made it to Mexico, and authorities soon learned that her mother wasn't ever ill in the first place. A few days later, a welfare check was launched by the local police, but they didn't find Nancy at her apartment. 1 week prior to vanishing, she had routinely spoken with her mother. She sounded normal and didn't mention that she would be visiting or that she would be going to Mexico at all. Nancy was driving her 2001 Chevrolet Impala sedan, a burgundy vehicle bearing the North Carolina license plate DFD 2191. Investigators found no record of the woman boarding a flight to Mexico, nor did they find that her vehicle had ever crossed the border. Further investigation uncovered Nancy's phone records, which showed that she was making phone calls after her disappearance to an out-of-state phone number. Detectives didn't gain access to her Google account until January of 2020. The account revealed that she'd been using Google Maps to get to a Madison car dealership on the very day that she went missing. When police followed up with this lead in the case, though, again it went cold. They also found that Nancy's Google account had been logged into in 2019. It revealed a location just 30 miles from her hometown in Mexico. Detectives made contact with the authorities in the area, who headed out to the location, but they still found nothing indicating that Nancy was ever there, or her possible whereabouts. No evidence of foul play was found in the disappearance, and a reward of $7,000 is being offered to anyone with information leading to this missing person being found. A retired deputy sheriff and member of the Hispanic Outreach Committee, Olin Das, traveled to Ashboro to aid the family and reach out to the Hispanic population who lived in the area. Despite extensive efforts, Nancy remains missing, and her case is unsolved. Earlier this year, police received information that prompted them to search the area at Deep River Bridge, but nothing came of this effort. She's been described as a Hispanic Latino female with black hair and brown eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she stood at a height of 5 feet and 2 inches tall and weighed around 90 to 125 pounds. Distinctive features include a star tattoo on her finger and piercing on both ears. Nancy would now be 34 years old. Any information about this missing person should be directed to the Ashboro Police Department, who can be reached at 336-626-1300, or the Randolph County Crime Stoppers at 336-672-7463. We all know that fire and water don't mix all too well, but it appears that on rare occasions this fact is defied. A place shrouded in mystery can be found in western New York in the Shale Creek Preserve. This mystery has baffled geologists with its juxtaposition of water and fire. The place is referred to as Eternal Flame Falls. The waterfall reaches a height of 35 feet, but it's not the flow of water and photo opportunity that's attracting to visitors. Beyond the falls, nestled in the caves, is a forever dancing flame that flickers a greeting to anyone who peers inside. Scientists were quick to supposedly determine the cause of the eternal flame, attributing it to a natural gas vent in the caves. The mysterious aura and science-defying phenomenon mesmerized the locals. Some of them accepted the solution that scientists presented to them, while others played on the idea of the supernatural. Researchers from Indiana University, though, also came to investigate the eternal flame. They found that scientists who had initially concluded the cause of the flame had missed something crucial. The cave rocks were not hot enough to form the necessary gas pockets to keep the flame flickering, leaving the enduring question, what keeps the flame burning behind the falls? Scientists have found no explanation for it, but local legends speak of Native American tribes that they claim lit the fire some thousands of years prior, and it's burned ever since. Despite varying weather conditions, including heavy rains and snowstorms, the fire stays. On rare occasions, human intervention is needed to reignite it. While some researchers and experts agree that the cause is an ancient geological process, the exact formation remains under study. Legends have been sparked since the discovery of the eternal flame. They speak of the Eternal Guardian, who watches over the falls, a gateway to other worlds, and the blessing rained upon the area by Native American gods. Others have suggested that the flame is a curse or an immortal animal who drank from the falls and was granted immortality as a flame. We may never know exactly what the cause of the small fire is, how it keeps burning, or its reason for being. Banksy served as an enduring entity of inspiration among artists around the globe. Some such artists have occasionally taken the idea of producing public art without signing their names to it, leaving the citizens wondering where it came from and who did it. One piece of art has been referred to as the Unknown Sculpture by the London Spy in their blog. The installation occurred in London in front of the Royal Exchange. It was a sitting figure made up of welded together pennies placed on top of the plinth. It had appeared in 2018 out of nowhere, but as soon as it appeared, it disappeared. The reason for that is because the sculpture didn't belong there. It was not an approved art installation, but rather the works of an unknown individual who was trying to convey an unknown message. Initially, the London Spy thought it might be a tribute to a Sherlock Holmes story, the story about the man with the twisted lip. It speaks of a beggar who frequented the area near where this strange sculpture had popped up. The blogger proceeded to add the pictures of the penny sculpture, which took the shape of the front of a person's body. At its one foot, there sat a penny bucket, possibly depicting a tin can or a hat. The figure's hand hovered over it as if to ask, "Can you spare a penny?" The statue was eventually removed, and along with it, any explanation. We may never know who put it there and why. The plinth stood empty until several years later when a lamp post was established in its place. The origins of the penny sculpture remain a mystery. Perhaps it was a tribute to the Sherlock Holmes story, but we may never know. This wasn't the only time that a sculpture enigmatically popped up without explanation, though, and without origin. Between 1982 and 1999, various sculptures began to appear in various areas of Amsterdam. They were attributed to the Dutch Banksy, an unknown figure who established various statues under the cover of night. Much like the graffiti artist, the sculpture is sneaky too and remains unidentified. Speculations brew of a local doctor who smacks out a massive sculpture in his spare time. Installations include the violinist that burst through the wall of the City Opera House and a small man standing on a tree branch swaying away at it. It then happened again as recently as 2023, this time in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Sat atop a concrete plinth were 3 Xerces blue butterflies. These species of butterfly have long been extinct, and the sculpture bore words reminiscent of this. At its base lay a plaque that reads as follows, saying, quote, "Memorial to the extinct. Xerces blue butterfly, driven to extinction by urban development and the destruction of the sand dunes of the San Francisco Peninsula. The Xerces blue was last seen in Presidio on March 23, 1943. The sculpture was removed shortly after it began to get noticed. Just like the previously mentioned sculptures, the identity of the Xerces blue butterfly artist remains an enduring mystery." Mount Vatavara is a popular tourist attraction in Russia. It's situated within the remote forests of Karelia. The mountain serves as the highest point of West Karelian Highlands, situated 417.3 meters above sea level. 9,000 years ago, the area was subjected to a large earthquake, resulting in a great failure. As a result of this failure, a natural real amphitheater emerged. The amphitheater was dotted with small lakes and cliffs, and soon the mountain grabbed the attention of scientists who believed that it was an important and unique geological monument. But it turns out that it was also the center of pilgrimage for followers of various mystical trends. They claim that it focuses on evil forces and a bridge to another world. But this geological construct is mysterious for other reasons. In some areas, the plateau has been dotted with trees of odd heights. Some 200-year-old pine trees only reach 2 meters tall, and where birch trees twist in a spin formation, evading any reasoning. Branches twist into bizarre shapes and dramatic deformations. An unknown energy is believed to be responsible for these effects, but no one has been able to determine what that energy is. At the very top of Mount Vatavara, there are 6 square miles of land, with 1,600 stones taking on a mysterious look, some of which defy gravity. Large boulders are placed upon smaller stones, making one wonder how they came to be. The stones are referred to as stone Seids. The name is reminiscent of an ancient tribe known as the Sami. The Samis believed that spirits lived in the stones that would help anyone who offered up a sacrifice. Modern research has uncovered two lines of belief in the ancient tribe, one of which was the cult of Sadas, which worshipped hunting patrons, rocks, and stones that were shaped like animals. The other was the human-like stones, dedicated to the cult of the forefathers. The worship of the stone creations pressed on until at least the early 1900s. Mount Vadavara is said to be one of the most popular Russian anomalous zones. It's referred to as the place of power, where a portal to another dimension serves as an enduring rumor. It's said that the vibrations of the earth and the energy from space can be felt here. While the stories brought about many skeptics, the presence of anomalies is undisputable. Adding even further mystery to the area is the lack of fauna and the lakes that harbor no aquatic life forms. Adding to the intrigue are the smooth stone spheres, reminiscent of the Bosnia and Costa Rica spheres that are all still shrouded in mystery. Ruined stairs lay as evidence of a larger building that no longer rests there, and a prehistoric wall made of squared blocks fitted together with such precision that it defies any natural formation, leaving pure mystery in its wake. 19-year-old Brooklyn Laux was working as a waitress at Primetime Bar and Grill in Beech Grove, Indiana. It was 2002 and she was getting out of a 5-year-long relationship with her boyfriend, who she moved in with after having finished high school. Brooklyn ended up living with her younger sibling, Mista, and started working to get her life back on track. She had enrolled in courses to further her education and adopted a kitten. According to her sister, this was the happiest she'd been in a very long time. Brooklyn's life and her family's would take a drastic turn that same year. It was around 4 p.m. on the 24th of June in 2002 when she arrived home from her work shift. She discovered that her apartment in the 1400 block of Cottonwood Drive in Greenwood, Indiana had been burglarized, and she called 911. The police arrived at the scene and took a report, during which Brooklyn explained that among other items, her computer had been stolen. This acts as a key piece of information in the case. According to a witness, Brooklyn was spotted around 5:30 p.m. that evening, getting into her blue 1990 Chevy Corsica, with the man characterized as unidentified by a family friend. But this witness had seen this same man earlier that day in the parking lot of the apartment complex at around 3:30 p.m. It appeared that he was carrying a computer across the lot. Whether or not this was the same computer that Brooklyn had reported missing later on remains unknown. The unidentified male was described as having blonde, shaggy hair and was roughly guessed to be about 20 years of age. At an unspecified time, the woman made contact with her mother, stating that she would be staying at her new boyfriend's place, which was 30 minutes away in Martinsville. But Brooklyn didn't make it to the boyfriend's house, and she subsequently vanished. 2 days later, she was reported missing to the Greenwood Police Department when she didn't show up for work. An investigation determined that at the time she went missing, she had no bank account, credit card, or cell phone. A few days later, police received a tip leading them to Brooklyn's missing vehicle. It was found on the 1st of July in Waverly, abandoned near Indiana State Road 37 and Highway 144, 10 miles away from her apartment. There were no signs of the missing woman in or around the car, and the driver's seat was pushed to the back, indicating that she hadn't been the driver. The car keys were also located on the floorboard underneath the steering wheel. It was also at this point that officers learned of Joe Nowicki, a family friend. According to a neighbor, it was in this area that they picked up Nowicki on the same day that Brooklyn vanished. Investigators also discovered that she'd been making phone calls a mile away from where the Corsica was found. Adding to Brooklyn's mother, her daughter would help look after Nowicki's horses on occasion. Furthermore, a neighbor saw Brooklyn's car outside of his home that evening around 7 p.m. It didn't take long before police named him as the prime suspect in the case. Despite finding crucial evidence pointing to Nowicki, detectives couldn't tie him to any crime. There was clear evidence that the missing woman had been at the man's property. They also found a thumbprint belonging to Nowicki at the boot of the car, but they later found that he'd actually worked on the Corsica previously, and it wasn't enough to convict him of anything. Despite his extensive criminal record, he wasn't tied to the disappearance, and the circumstances surrounding it remain unclear. The only suspect named in the case passed away from cancer just 1 year later, and Brooklyn remains missing. At the time of her disappearance, Brooklyn Laux was 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighed 120 pounds. At the time she went missing, She was wearing a light-colored blouse, dark capri pants, pink sandals, and a gold ring with 2 hearts on it surrounded by diamonds. She has dark hair and blue eyes. Her ears have been pierced many times, and she wears a size 3 in clothing. Any information regarding this missing person should be directed to the Greenwood Police Department at 317-887-5212 or Crime Stoppers of Central Indiana at 317-262-8477. Shane Fell's disappearance is one that has left many people scratching their heads, since it contains some very strange details, and by all accounts, he should never have gone missing, but he's not been found to this day. Shane, who hailed from Harvey in Louisiana, was employed as a technical advisor for Verifone, and in his off time, he enjoyed playing pool with his friends or his brother. On the night of the 10th of June, 2011, this is exactly what he was doing, as he and his brother had decided to go to Rum Runner's Bar in Marrero with a few friends. By 12:30 a.m., they decided to go home, and Shane and his brother left, each in his own car. But Shane would never make it home. Along the way, he seemingly lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a ditch by the side of a river road. The collision caused his car to roll over, but Shane emerged unscathed, or so it seemed to his brother, who he called as soon as he got his bearings after exiting the car via the passenger window. His brother received his call at 12:40 a.m. and was relieved when Shane told him that he wasn't hurt. He turned his car around and started heading back in Shane's direction, but Shane told him that he would find his own way home. But his brother insisted and continued to the scene of the accident. Shane waited patiently, but then phoned his brother once more to make sure that he was on his way to help. To his surprise, when his brother reached the scene, several police officers had already arrived, along with the fire department and an ambulance. But this is when the case took a strange turn. Shane told his brother that he would be waiting by the car, but neither the police officers nor anyone at the scene could find any sign of him, which didn't make sense, since he knew that help was on the way. A quick search of the area resulted in one of his shoes being found covered in mud, a short distance away. The rest of the area was searched, but no further trace of him was found, and he remains missing to this day. There was speculation that he may have seen the police lights approaching and decided to flee, but since that day, he hasn't accessed his bank account and hasn't been in touch with any of his friends or family. When investigators spoke to his brother, he told them that Shane seemed completely normal while they were talking on the phone, and he could see no reason why he would decide to leave the scene of the accident, especially since he knew his brother was just a few minutes away. During the call, he was able to tell his brother which road he'd crashed on, suggesting that he did indeed have his wits about him. The only reasonable explanation that anyone could find was that Shane may have hit his head as the car rolled over, and that he suffered a head injury, causing him to lose his memory. His family stated that if this was the case, he would likely have gone back to Savannah, Georgia, since he lived in that area for a long time. Shane is described by his family as having brown hair, hazel eyes, standing 6 foot to 6 foot 2 inches tall, and weighing between 190 and 210 pounds. While at the bar, he was wearing a white long-sleeved shirt with brown vertical stripes, blue jeans, and black shoes. Anyone who sees Shane or knows where he is asked to get in touch with the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office at 504-364-5300. His NamUs case number is MP11655. Number 9. The ocean is a vast and unforgiving area of our planet that still holds information and secrets that we've yet to discover. Some areas of the seas are so deep that we've never been able to travel there due to the massive pressures that exist at such depths. But it sometimes happens that the ocean reveals some of its mysteries when it dumps an object out onto land. In most cases, these items are easily identified, but sometimes we're left baffled and no explanation is ever found. In July of 2024, such an event occurred in Australia, and as of yet, experts have only been able to speculate as to what the object is that had ended up on a particular beach. And as is the way with the internet, a lot of people have their own theories. On the 16th of July, 2 residents of Greenhead in Western Australia were walking on a beach near Jurien Bay when they noticed a strange object shimmering in the waves, and they decided to take a closer look. They found a cylindrical object measuring about 10 feet in length and about 8 feet in diameter, washing back and forth, and they decided to pull it out of the water with the use of a four-wheel drive vehicle. It had spent quite some time in the ocean since it was encrusted with barnacles, and the decision was made to contact the authorities since no one had any idea what they had stumbled upon. But even before the police could arrive, the object had started attracting a crowd as people started wondering what the mysterious cylinder could be. When officers from Western Australia police arrived, they asked people to steer clear of the object since they were uncertain whether it could be hazardous. Some people thought that it might be space junk and that it made its way through the Earth's atmosphere, ultimately crashing into the ocean before being carried to the beach by strong currents. There was also the mention of extraterrestrial crafts, but most witnesses suggested that it was likely a part of a space rocket that was ejected during one of the stages of its launch, which seemed far more plausible. But the police announced that the object would be treated as hazardous until it could be determined that it was safe to be around. They then released a statement in which they reassured the public that it wasn't part of a commercial aircraft, since some people thought it may be part of a missing plane that was believed to have crashed some time ago. The Australian Space Agency suggested that it may be part of a foreign space launch vehicle, possibly India's moon satellite. If this is the case, the cylinder would have separated from the rocket after launch and then fallen back to Earth. No official explanation has been given as to what the object is, but it's now known that it isn't hazardous, much to the relief of people living in the area. Number 8. In August of 1976, 24-year-old Patricia Otto was living in Lewiston, Idaho, along with their husband, 42-year-old Ralph. Their marriage wasn't going too well, as Patricia had filed for a divorce, but by all accounts, the couple had made amends in May of that year. On the 31st of August, their children had been spending time with their grandmother, and at around 11 a.m., Patricia arrived at her house to pick them up, after which she made her way back home. But once she got home, she and Ralph got into an argument, which, according to one of their daughters, got physical. She would later tell investigators that Ralph had put his hands around Patricia's throat at one point, and that he'd pushed her up against a wall. The following day, Ralph drove the children to Patricia's sister's house, where he dropped them off but gave no explanation as to where his wife was. He only stated that she wasn't home, and that he was about to start searching for her. Her sisters started getting worried and decided to contact the Lewiston police to file a missing person report. When no sign of Patricia was found, Ralph told the children that Patricia had decided to abandon them since she didn't want to be a mother anymore. When searches of the area were conducted and no clues were found, investigators started looking more closely at Ralph as they speculated that he may have been responsible for her disappearance, or worse. He stated that he believed Patricia had been having an affair with another man, and when he learned that he was a suspect, he complained that he was being harassed by the police. This prompted him to make a very unwise decision. He hired a hitman to end the life of a detective who was investigating the case, but unbeknownst to him, the man was an undercover police officer, and Ralph was taken into custody. He was charged with attempted murder and was ultimately sentenced to 10 years behind bars. And this is where Patricia's case went cold, and to date, there have been no further developments and no further suspects have been identified. But since the law in Idaho at the time didn't consider the act of hiring a hitman to be equivalent to the charge he was given, Ralph's prison sentence was overturned and he was set free. He would be arrested again for an unrelated incident that occurred years later, and while incarcerated, he passed away. Many people think that he took the answers to Patricia's disappearance to the grave with him. There's been much speculation that Patricia may be the Finley Creek Jane Doe, whose remains were found in August of 1978. But this was never proven, as the remains and the clothes that the woman was wearing were destroyed before further analysis could be done. The woman was found to have been wearing similar clothing to that of which Patricia was wearing when she went missing. One of Patricia's daughters, Suzanne Timms, believes that her mother was indeed the Finley Creek Jane Doe, but her efforts to prove this have been in vain so far. When she disappeared, Patricia was wearing a white blouse with red slacks. She's described as having blonde hair, hazel eyes, standing 5 foot 3 inches tall, and weighing around 140 pounds. It's also known that she has a scar on her back. Anyone with information on Patricia's case is urged to call the Lewiston Police Department at 208-746-0171. Patricia's nameless case number is MP2064. Number 7. When we think of UFO sightings, most of us think of the areas most associated with the phenomenon, such as New Mexico or the US. But these sightings occur all over the world on a near daily basis, as is evidenced by an event that occurred in Cambridgeshire, England in 2018. On the 22nd of April, a man whose name has not been made public noticed something strange in the sky, and at first he thought it was just an unusually bright star. But when it started moving, he pulled out his cell phone to see if he could record footage of it. He would later tell media outlets that it was around 11 p.m. that night when he decided to have a cigarette, and to do so he went outside. That's when he saw the two lights in the sky, one hovering about 300 feet above the ground, while the other, an orange light, was spotted just above a tree line. He added that the nearest light, the orange one, hovered in the air for about 5 minutes before it moved out of his field of vision. But when the other light seemed to remain in the area, he decided to film it. He recorded the object with his phone for about 15 minutes, after which he decided to go to bed, and when he went back inside, it was still hovering in the air. Hence, he has no idea how long it remained in the area. He speculated that it was flying above the River Cam, which is about 2 miles from his house. He added that the light moved in unpredictable and inexplicable ways, leading many people to believe that it was a craft of some kind. At one point, it started darting from side to side, and when it suddenly moved behind a tree, he got the eerie sensation that it was watching or monitoring him, even though it was still quite some distance away. He made sure to motion that he isn't the type of person who's interested in UFOs and extraterrestrials, but added that he was having a hard time explaining what he saw. He speculated that it may have been a helicopter, but dismissed this thought since he couldn't hear any sound emanating from it. He even considered that it might be a drone, but thought that the lights that he'd seen just didn't look like the typical ones found on a drone. To this day, he has no plausible explanation, and no official statements have been made by the authorities. One man who heard about the sighting told a news outlet that he had a very similar experience the previous year when he was driving from Cottenham to Milton. At around 10 p.m., he spotted what he describes as a cluster of white sparkles on the horizon. The sparkles seemed to appear and disappear at random, and from what he could see, they seemed to be blinking in and out of one area before materializing in another. He also mistook the sparkles for stars at first, but then he saw some of the objects leaving the area by flying directly upward. But not everyone is convinced that this latest sighting was a UFO. Some have stated the object seems to be stationary, and hence may have been the planet Venus that was mistaken for an object much closer to the witness than was assumed. Others thought that he may have unknowingly filmed the International Space Station rather than a flying craft, but none of these theories have ever been proven. Number 6. Bagwanyala Lal was 31 years old when he and his aunt went missing from Florida in June of 1994, and his case remains unsolved to this day. Originally from Guyana, Bagwanyala eventually moved to Georgetown in the 1970s, where his family then started an animal breeding and exporting business. Having gained experience in this field, he later joined another family business called Malabar Aviary, which imported birds from Guyana, after which they were sold in the US. But it wouldn't take long before Bagwanyala set out on his own adventure. In the 1980s, he rented a warehouse in Queens, New York, which served as a type of quarantine center for birds that had just been imported. This was a necessary practice since imported birds had to be held in quarantine for at least 30 days before being sold. He then relocated to Florida with his aunt, Lilawati, in 1992. Here, they expanded their bird importing business by renting a large ranch, which was located on Velasquez Road. By all accounts, they were both private people who were rarely seen outside of the ranch. They employed 2 ranch hands named Harry and Roland to help out with the ever-growing number of birds that were being brought into the country. But on the 4th of June, 1994, both Bagwanyala and Lilawati could not be located when a delivery person from the Birdhaven Feed Company arrived at the ranch to drop off the supplies that they'd ordered for the following week. The man decided to jump over a fence to see if he could find someone to accept the delivery. and he expected at least to see the two ranch hands, but he was unable to find anyone. With no other option, he left the feed at the ranch's gate and drove away. He decided to make a turn at the ranch the following morning, and when he realized that the feed was still where he had left it, he felt that something was wrong and called the police for assistance. The case would be a complicated one, since it was unsure whether jurisdiction belonged to the sheriff's office, the county's animal control, or the Florida Game and Freshwater Fishing Commission. Hence, the investigation into the disappearances only started 10 days after it had become apparent that something was wrong on the ranch. But when all of this was cleared up, the ranch was searched with no success. From the way the ranch was left, it was estimated that Bagwanyala, Lawadi, Harry, and Roland had been missing for 10 days, and when the birds were removed, they were found to be worth between $500,000 and $700,000. Roland would be located by the police on the 18th of June, and he stated that he'd quit the ranch about 2 weeks prior to the disappearances. But he did state that Roland had seen two men arriving at the ranch in a white van before leading Bagwanyala and Lilawadi to the vehicle with firearms pointed at them. It would then come to light that Bagwanyala had made a loan with an underground figure, since he wanted to start a reptile importing business, and it was speculated that this had something to do with the disappearances. Strangely, Harry was later found to be driving Bagwanyala's car, and when asked for his license, he produced Bagwanyala's. Unfortunately, Harry had been able to fool the police since they only realized all these details after he was released, and he's never been located again. It's believed that if Harry isn't involved in the disappearances, he likely knows who is, and hence he's wanted by the police for questioning. Since the details in this case are so very strange, the police suspect that foul play is involved, and they've asked anyone who knows what happened to Bagwanyala and Lilawadi to contact the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office at 561-688-3000. Bagwanyala is described as having black hair and brown eyes, weighing 165 pounds and standing 5 foot 7 inches tall. Lilawadi has black hair, brown eyes, stands 5 foot 5 inches tall, and weighs 115 pounds. Bagwanyala's NamUs case number is MP28168, and Lilawadi's case number is MP28167. Number 5. Most of us are familiar with the legend of Arthur and Excalibur, the famous sword that he pulled from a stone to prove himself to be the worthy king of England. But not everyone is aware that such a sword exists in France, the Durandal Sword. According to legend, the sword was once wielded by a knight named Roland, and after it was embedded in a rock more than 1,300 years ago, it remained as sharp as it had ever been, which should not have been possible, since it was considered to be one of the sharpest blades ever created. According to a poem entitled The Song of Roland, which was written in the 11th century, the sword was given to Charlemagne by an angel, who then in turn gave it to Roland, who was serving under his reign. But it's thought to be even older than that, since many people believe it first belonged to Hector of Troy. Roland grew very fond of the sword, according to legend, and feared that it may fall into enemy hands. He decided to destroy it, since it was a very powerful weapon, but try as he might, he could find no way to destroy it, and instead he decided to throw it as far away from him as he could. The sword traveled through the air to the village of Durandal, where it struck and became embedded in a wall about 33 feet up from the ground, and there it remained for the next 1,300 years. Eventually, it was replaced with a replica, which became a popular tourist attraction in the town. Tour guides used to stand below the sword, telling visitors of the legend, but that may now have to change, as it mysteriously disappeared on the 21st of June, 2024. Most people believe that someone managed to pull it from the rock and then stole it, but others find this hard to believe, since it would not have been easy to remove it, and since it was in a precarious spot that would have been hard to get to. A member of the public noticed that the sword was no longer in the rock the following morning and immediately notified the police. An investigation was then launched, but to date, no one has been named as a suspect and the sword remains missing. The town's mayor, Dominique L'Enfant, stated that the sword will be sorely missed since it played such a big part in the area's lore for such a long time, and investigations are still ongoing in hopes that it'll be found and placed back in its rightful place in the rock. But since no clues were found at the scene, this seems unlikely, and it's far more likely that it's been sold by whoever removed it, probably for a paltry sum of money that pales in comparison with the sword's history and lore. Number 4. It's remarkable how many people go missing after telling their loved ones that they were merely stepping out to complete simple chores, such as taking out the trash or taking their dog for a walk. This is what happened to occupational therapist 37-year-old Patricia Manassian, who's a resident of Hingham in Massachusetts, in June of 1996. Patricia was married and had 3 children. At the time she went missing, she, her family, and her in-laws were enjoying some time off at a family cottage that was located in Cape Cod. On the 30th of June, she bathed her 2-year-old son and then told her mother and father-in-law that she was going to drive into town to get their minivan, a maroon 1994 Mercury Villager, washed. But when she didn't come home that evening and remained missing the following morning, her family started to become concerned for her safety. The minivan was found the next day, where it sat locked in the parking lot of a restaurant in Wellfleet, 50 miles from the cottage. Her husband immediately recognized the restaurant as the one where he and Patricia had gone on their first date 18 years earlier, and the mystery started to deepen. That same day, he found Patricia's pocketbook in their other car, and inside he found a 15-page letter that she had written. In the letter, she stated that she believed he and their children would be better off if she wasn't around, but also wrote that she loved them all very much. Investigators immediately speculated that she may have ended her own life, but nothing in the letter suggested that this was her plan. Her husband told them that she was known to have suffered from depression in the past, but that she'd never spoken about or attempted such an act in all the years that he'd known her. He felt that this theory was incorrect, but investigators needed to cover all the bases of the case, and hence they started searching for clues on the beaches surrounding the area, since they felt she may have intentionally gone missing into the water. Cahoon Hollow and Newcomb Hollow were searched thoroughly from the air, with the aid of helicopters and a team of police divers, but no sign of Patricia was found. They kept a close eye on her bank accounts and her social security number, but neither of these has been used since the day she went missing. Back at the cottage, her husband found her keys, $12 in cash, her ID, purse, credit cards, and her wedding ring. It seemed as though Patricia had simply vanished into thin air, since not a single trace of her could be found. The following year, someone reported that they'd seen a woman fitting Patricia's description near Brockton, Massachusetts, but that person was never found again, and it was never confirmed whether this was Patricia or not. Her husband stated that she'd been in a car accident more than 2 years prior to her disappearance, which left her with back and head injuries, and that she'd been suffering with bouts of depression ever since. But he remained adamant that she would never consider taking her own life. He believes she simply left and started a new life somewhere else. Patricia's disappearance remains a mystery to this day. She's described as having brown hair and green eyes. She stands about 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighs 120 pounds. When she left the cottage that day, she was known to be wearing a gray sweatshirt and black pants. If you or anyone you know has any information on this case, you're asked to get in contact with the Massachusetts State Police at 508-394-2233 or 800-344-2722, quoting case number 96102-7098-0295. Number 3. We've all dreamed about winning the lottery or stumbling across a treasure that would afford us untold riches for the rest of our lives. While this is a mere fantasy to most people, one metal detectorist in Norway was pleasantly surprised when he found something rather valuable one day that has left experts perplexed. The area is far more famous for its excellent ski slopes, but on this day, the man who's not been named decided to take his metal detector into the mountains to see what he could find. The machine indicated a piece of metal, and when he unearthed it, he was shocked to find that it was a gold coin containing the image of Jesus. The coin was later determined to have been minted around 969 CE, which means that it must have remained hidden in the mountains for a very long time. The coin contained the image of Jesus holding a Bible on one side, and on the other, images of Basil II and Constantine VIII, two brothers who ruled the Byzantine Empire near the beginning of the 10th century. On one side, it's inscribed with the words, Jesus Christ, King of those who reign, and on the other it reads Basil and Constantine, Emperors of the Romans. While the coin isn't unheard of, this particular one was in remarkably good condition, leading many people to believe that it was lost in the mountains for centuries. Historians believe that the coin was produced in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, but are at a loss as to how it ended up in the mountains of Norway. Since then, quite a few theories have been posited. It's been suggested that the coin was brought there by Harald Hardrada, who served as the king of Norway from 1045 to 1066. But if he was the one who possessed the coin, it would have been before he was crowned, at a time when he served as a bodyguard to several other Byzantine emperors. The theory holds that when an emperor passed away, their guards would often help themselves to some of their possessions and money. Since Hardrada served 3 different emperors, he would have had ample opportunity to get his hands on some of their valuables, and possibly this coin was part of such looting. It's further hypothesized that he then intended to marry a princess from Kiev, and that the coin was part of the dowry that he sent to Ukraine, but that it somehow became lost while being moved across the mountains. Another theory suggests that it was being carried by someone who was trading items in the region at the time, and that it merely fell out of their pocket while they were crossing the mountains, which must have been quite disappointing when they realized that it was lost, if that was indeed the case. Plans are now being made for the area where the coin was found to be properly investigated and possibly excavated in hopes that other items might be found, and along with them some answers. But until that's done, we can only speculate as to how this valuable coin ended up in the mountains of Norway. Number 2. 28-year-old Marilyn McCown grew up in a large family and was one of 10 children who spent their childhoods in Richmond, Indiana. She was the youngest of all the children, and when she turned 19, she started dating Stephen Johnson, with whom she had a child. But their relationship would eventually come to an end, and Marilyn was granted custody of her daughter. After relocating to Dayton, Ohio in 1994, she started working as an accountant clerk at the Montgomery Education and Pre-Release Center. In her spare time, she attended criminal justice courses at Sinclair Community College, since she had ambitions of becoming a U.S. Marshal. 4 years later, she met a man named Bobby Webster, and the couple eventually got engaged. They'd known each other for a long time, having met in high school, and they set their wedding date for August of 2001. But 3 weeks before their big day, Marilyn mysteriously disappeared, and her case remains unsolved. What we know about the case is that Marilyn and Bobby went to a church service at the Mount Olive Baptist Church on the morning that she went missing, the 22nd of July. After the service, she and her daughter, who's now 9 years old, traveled to Marilyn's parents' house, where she dropped her daughter off and stated that she was headed to the Richmond coin laundry. She washed some clothing and placed it in the tumble dryer, and while waiting for it to dry, she went back to her parents' house. Here, she told them that she had some trouble with 2 men who she described as Hispanic, but she didn't seem overly concerned about the incident. She then returned to the laundromat, but her family has not seen or heard from her since. When an investigation was launched after she was reported missing, investigators checked the laundromat's CCTV security cameras and spotted Marilyn as she moved the clothes from the dryer and carried them out to her car at 2:45 p.m. Inside the couple's apartment, investigators found her purse and ID, and while her bank account and cell phone activity were monitored, this provided no further clues, as they've not been used since. Then, Bobby started exhibiting some strange behavior and suspicious behavior. He contacted the church where he and Marilyn were meant to get married, as well as the reception hall, and canceled all of their plans, making sure to retrieve the deposit that had been paid. He then attempted to return both the wedding rings that they'd bought, but since Marilyn's was the only name on the receipt, he could not be refunded. Suspicion quickly fell on Bobby, and he was asked to take a polygraph test, to which he agreed. Investigators would later reveal that he'd shown signs of being deceptive, but despite this, they didn't think that he was responsible for his fiance's disappearance, and he was never charged. 4 months after she disappeared, Marilyn's car was found abandoned in a parking lot of the Meadows of Catalpa apartment complex in Dayton. The laundry was still inside, neatly folded, and investigators could find no sign that anything untoward had taken place in the vehicle. The only strange details were that the battery and stereo had been removed, and that the car was found in the complex where Marilyn had once shared a place with an ex-boyfriend. The man was located and questioned, but never named as a suspect. One of her co-workers later told the police that Marilyn had told her that she was supposed to pick up medication from a pharmacy in the area. It was also considered that she may have had an affair with a coworker named Tommy Swint, and he was named as a person of interest since he was found guilty of ending another woman's life in 1991. But this could never be proven since he's now deceased. Marilyn's fate remains unknown, and the Richmond Police Department have asked anyone with information to contact them at 765-983-7247. Marilyn has brown hair and brown eyes. She stands 5 foot 2 inches tall and at the time weighed 115 pounds. She was last seen wearing a pink and purple swimsuit top with dark shorts. Marilyn's NamUs case number is MP1048. Number 1. Whenever someone makes a significant historical discovery, such as unearthing a valuable ancient artifact, they usually look forward to a hefty payday or having their name immortalized as the discoverer. But in a case that took place in Ireland in June of 2024, someone anonymously donated a pair of very old axe heads to the National Museum of Ireland, and now the museum is asking anyone with information on the donor to come forward. The axe heads are thought to be from the early Bronze Age, which means that they're thousands of years old, dating back to about 2000 BC, and therefore are quite a remarkable discovery. Staff at the museum were perplexed when they received a package at the end of June, and when they opened it, found it to contain the axe heads. Very little is known about the artifacts, other than some details that were included in a letter that accompanied the axes. The donor stated that they were found in the Westmeath area, with the use of a metal detector, but they failed to include their name or any other contact details. But they did take every precaution to ensure the axe heads remained intact, as they lined the box that they were packed with foam cutouts and pieces of cardboard. When experts studied the two items more closely, they determined that they were flat axe heads and described them as a significant discovery that can help us learn more about Ireland's very distant past. There's much to be learned from these two items, but no further research can be carried out until it's determined exactly where the axe heads were unearthed. A study of the same area might uncover further relics, and hence the museum has appealed to the sender to come forward for the sake of adding to the country's history. Further findings give us a glimpse into the lifestyles and practices of settlements that lived in the area at the time. It's possible that a nearby settlement may have stored other items in the area long ago, and that these may still be found, providing a wealth of information on what life was like in the area during the early Bronze Age. The museum has also stated that the donor can remain anonymous if they wish to do so, and that any further information on the find would be used merely to verify the location where they were discovered. It's thought that the metal detectorist may not have had a valid permit to search for artifacts in that area, and hence they're worried about the legal implications that may follow. But for now, they've not come forward, and only time will tell if we'll ever learn more about the discovery and the people who lived in that area thousands of years ago. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.